There we are, that's better. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Monday, July 9th meeting of the Lincoln City Council. Let's all rise for a Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin, I'd like to recognize that there's a scout troop in our midst tonight. Troop, and I wrote the number down so I wouldn't forget it, and then 75. Scout 672. Is that right? We'd like to thank you for joining us, and it's good to see you in the house. I have a statement I should read and remind everyone about our city council. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chambers. The order of the business of the city council is as follows. The clerk will call items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may make a short rebuttal statement. Each speaker should begin by stating their name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After public hearings, the City Council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor planned for a future agenda. And I think there was some confusion. This is the second Monday of the month, but this is the first meeting of the month. So there will be no public hearing tonight. And at that point, we'll ask the clerk to call the first item.
All right, just a reminder to the public, our July 30th council meeting will not be at 5:30 p.m. It will start at 2:30 p.m. for the budget hearing. Our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Is there anyone in the audience like to speak on these items? Seeing no one coming forward,
All right, we can vote on these items. Item 1A was introduced by Eskridge.
So moved. Second.
we have a motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilman Christensen. Is there any discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Items 2A through F were introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilwoman Gaylor Baird, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 4A and B together. They're the application of B&B Convenience Store for a Class D liquor license at 5700 North 33rd Circle, as well as the related manager application.
Is there someone in the audience to testify on this item?
Hi, Mike. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my client just arrived and we're waiting for an interpreter, so if you could pass over us for a second and then we'll be ready in a few minutes.
Thank you. Is that agreeable to everyone? Yes. Thank you, we will.
Thank you.
Come back to you in a moment. Teresa, would you move to the next item, please? then?
Sure. The next item then, I'll call items 4C, D, and E. They're the application of Cosmic Eye Brewing for a Class C and a Class L liquor license at 6800 P Street, Suite 300, as well as the related manager application.
Hi.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
My name is Sam Riggins. My home address is 5716 Lenox Avenue, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Mr. Wiggins, welcome. Tell us about your application.
Hi, yes, I'm here for our application. We are hopefully opening a brewery and tap room in the old Laser Quest space at 6800 P Street. That's suite number 300. We hope to be up and brewing sometime next month and have the tap room open sometime late next month. We are a family-owned brewery, 100% family-owned. We're looking to both provide quality beers and a great place in East Lincoln for our community.
Are there questions? Or do you want?
No, I'll let the gentleman, go ahead and.
Sure. I know that there's some people up here with some questions, so I think if we have questions for me, I think.
I think we were concerned that I cut you off. You didn't get to finish your testimony.
My testimony is that I am in favor of these applications and my manager application.
Okay, I asked for that, didn't I? I will go, Councilman Camp.
Yes, sir, Mr. Riggins. I was
Councilwoman-
curious, you
Woman
talked
Lamb.
about the brew pub side of it. Are you going to have any food?
What we're looking at doing is bringing in food trucks. We're putting in both water service and electrical service outside of our space, so we can have food trucks there providing food for people. We were originally going to be a restaurant. Plans didn't work out with my original partner, who was a chef, and we decided to move on the project minus the restaurant, mostly just because of the cost associated with building that out. So.
Councilwoman Lamb.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being here today. So you have two separate applications.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about the one versus the other?
Sure. The Class L is essentially my producer license, which allows me to operate as a production brewery where we're canning, bottling, kegging, and essentially sending out beer to the back door for distribution to other locations. What the C license allows us to do, with the L license, we're also able to run our own tap room. What the C license allows us to do is to provide alcohol that we have not produced in our tap room to other people. The reason we're applying for that C license, we know that not everybody's a craft beer fan. We don't want to give people a reason not to come to our space with their friends. So in addition to the alcohol that we produce, that will be beer, we're hoping to provide a small selection of wine and spirits in order to have accommodating everyone's tastes. We're not planning that on being a large portion of our business. That's kind of there as accessory to our business.
And can you tell us what hours you're planning, your hours of operation?
Sure. I think most days, so a Monday through Thursday plan would be somewhere around 2 or 3 in the afternoon to 10 or 11 at night. The weekend hours, we'd like to probably open a little bit earlier than that on Fridays, just to catch people getting off work, probably being open a little later, maybe midnight, 1 o'clock. And then our Saturday and Sunday hours, we do have the bike trail right back there behind us. I know a lot of people get up really early and take really long bike rides. We'd like to be open earlier in the mornings, maybe 10 or 11 on Saturdays and Sundays, in order to accommodate those folks on the bike trail.
Are there other questions of the council? Is anyone else here to testify on this item? Seeing no one, I'll say thank you.
That's it for me.
That's
Awesome. Thanks.
Teresa, it appears as though our first item is, the representation is ready to go.
Okay.
We'll go back to item 4A and B.
Yes. That's the application of B&B Convenience Store for a Class D liquor license at 5700 North 33rd Circle and the related manager application. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Michael Reardon, appearing on behalf of the applicant, B&B Convenience Stores LLC. With me is the principal and managing member of that LLC, Bach Nguyen. As I indicated to you, his son was supposed to be here today to act as an interpreter. He's not here yet, so I guess I'll stand in the middle and try to act as the interpreter myself. It's my opinion that he's complied with all of the rules and regulations and statutes of the Nebraska Liquor Control Act. He's operating a convenience store right now and wants to add this license. There was a license there previously, but the former owner opted to let it expire, and so that's why we're in front of you again today is on a new license application. With that, I'd attempt to answer any questions the council members might have.
Are there questions from the council? Councilman Eskridge?
Yeah, this location is right across from North Star.
That's
Is that
correct.
right? Okay. And we've not heard of incidents relative to underage service or anything of that sort.
I'm not aware of any either.
Thank you.
And I might state that Bach has met with the police department and gone through that interview stage, and he is signed up for the class, I believe, in a week or so.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the council? Is anyone in the audience that wants to testify on this item? Seeing no one coming forward, I say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa, would you read our next item, please?
Yes, next would be item 4F, application of Small Town Bar, Inc., doing business as Rosie's Sports Bar and Grill, for the addition of a catering license to their Class I liquor license at 1501 Center Park Road, Suite 300. As I mentioned in our 2 o'clock meeting, I had received a request from the applicant to withdraw this item, but I was unable to clarify if he was for sure wishing to withdraw the catering license. So if we could just continue this public hearing and action for 1 week, then I can contact him.
You know, motion for that now or at the end?
We can do it at the end.
Would you go to our next item then, 4G?
Yes, so next then is the manager application of Nicholas Perry for Cheddar's at 5424 O Street. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Address is 3110 South 72nd. I'm asking to be listed as the general manager on the liquor license for Cheddar Scratch Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Are there questions of Mr. Perry? Is anyone in the office, let me do that again. Anyone in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Thank you. Hearing none.
Thank you.
All right, next then is the application of Burt Family Barbecue LLC for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 79 feet by 63 feet at Fat Jack's Barbecue at 101 Southwest 14th Place, Suite 102, on July 21st between 7 p.m. and 12 a.m.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Welcome. There's a microphone each on both sides and sign-in sheets on both sides.
No oath on SDLs.
No oath on this
Yeah.
one, good.
Tell
I'm
us-
Jacqueline Burt, 6232 Northwest Fifth Street.
Matthew Burt, 6232, or 6232 Northwest
It's
Fifth Street,
catchy.
sorry.
Tell us a little bit about your application.
We are doing a class reunion in the front of our restaurant. There is about 70 people so far RSVP to it. That's about what they're expecting, between 70 and 100 people. They're going to have a live band out there and beer and liquor sales. So.
Thank you. Are there questions from the council? Anyone in the audience like to testify on this item? Seeing no one, say thank you for coming forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa?
All right, that concludes our public hearing on the liquors.
And no, I think we have a motion coming.
Yes, Madam Clerk, I would move approval of all items under section 4, so it'd be A, B, C, D, E, exclude F, and then G and H.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Camp, a second by Councilman Gaylord Baird. Is there any discussion?
Please, yeah,
Yes.
so I have some questions for staff on the part of the ones and four, I'm sorry, from the law department.
On item C, D.
Yeah, I'm looking at 4, C, D, and E. You included those, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll attempt, Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney, I'll attempt to answer, but
Thank
not
you.
my area of expertise.
Oh, okay. Is there someone else you'd rather speak
I
to?
would, but I don't think she's here, so I'm the best you can do.
Okay. Well, so I do have some concerns. This one is, in particular, has a waiver application because it's within 130 foot of a school. There was also some concern about the People City Mission being 2 doors down and the nature of folks, problems of alcohol that folks traditionally associated with working and perhaps even visiting the People City Mission. And then as part of the waiver, there was a letter submitted to us from Joseph's that indicated that they had no objection, but in it they put that, and in fact the applicant also made note of this, that the hours of overlap were minimal. And so my question is, even though that may be the case at this point, and I had understood they were only open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so today I was surprised to hear it was all week. But is there anything, if we okay an application with a waiver, is there any limitation of the hours thereafter? Or can they just choose to open? They're not bound to any limitation, is that right?
Certainly, if you don't make any limitations this time, you couldn't come back and make a limitation. Are you asking if you made an amendment at this point, whether that would bind them?
Okay, and then, or alternative would be to deny the waiver and application and have it go to the Liquor Commission for a hearing, is that right?
Yes, that would be an option.
Okay, and so either one of those would be, but those would be the options that we would need to do if we wanted to make sure that those limited hours stay limited?
Correct.
Okay,
Well, and those would be the two alternatives today. Another alternative might be to delay action for, and I'm not sure what the timing is on this.
I think we could delay it a week.
Okay.
But as a point of clarification, I did have discussions with Tanya Peters, and was informed that Cosmic Brewing had secured their lease with the property owner first, and then the
Mission.
mission got their lease second. So the mission was aware that this company was coming in to do business.
okay, but what about Joseph's? So, and even if that were the case, actually the applicant put in their application that they had been negotiating but hadn't entered into their lease prior to the mission, that they may have been, so.
Well, and maybe Ms. Peters' point was that they had entered negotiations, and so the mission was aware that at least it was a possibility prior to the mission signing this
Right.
lease.
Yeah, and my understanding, though, was in those discussions, the mission was assured that these folks wouldn't be opening during the hours of the mission. And then, but since then, the Friday opening hours are planned to be different. And so that triggers my concern with these types of letters that are saying, hey, they're only minimal, but there really are no limitations if we pass it without an amendment.
And so that goes back to my suggestion, which is maybe if you delayed action for a week, that would give us time to contact the parties, but also have an amendment presented for you that would maybe give you some hours you're comfortable with.
Okay. So I am going to ask that these three be separated from the rest and that make a motion to delay 4C, 4D, and 4E until next week's meeting.
Second. We have a motion by Councilwoman Lamb, second by Councilman Christensen, to separate and delay these items 1 week.
Yeah, and my discussion would just be, I think that it would be good to find out what hours do Joseph consider outside of those hours, and for the People's City Mission, and then be looking at an amendment prior to that. Thank you.
Any other discussion of this motion to delay?
I'll support the delay. I would say that if council members have concerns about an item and are going to ask staff questions, and there's discussion about history on the application, it's nice to do that during the testimony stage of the public hearing so that the applicant can have rebuttal and weigh in and provide some response. But the delay will allow that, so.
To delay with public
Delay it
hearing.
with public hearing, absolutely.
Other discussion? So let's vote on that motion now.
Okay, Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And back to our original motion by Councilman Camp and
Right.
second by Councilman Christensen, which has been slightly modified now, all right?
Right, now it would be 4A, 4B, 4G, and 4H.
Need to,
Sec, or do we need to reset now?
I'm sorry, but
Do we need a second for that to revise it?
I think it was, yeah. I think we got a second originally.
Yep.
Any discussion? Hearing none, let's call the roll, please.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
And Mr. Chair, I would move on item 4F that we continue that for 1 week with public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilwoman Raybold, that we continue item 4F 1 week with public hearings. Is there any discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Thank you.
Next then are our public hearing resolutions. Item 5A, approving a contract agreement between the city and Mahoney Fire Sprinkler for inspection, testing, and maintenance of fire sprinkler systems for a 4-year term.
Hi,
Hi, welcome.
Shelley Hinsey with City Lincoln Purchasing Department.
Tell us a little bit about this.
This is a contract for fire sprinkler system inspection testing. It's a 4-year contract, and there'll be different departments that will be using that. It's for $20,000 for the 4-year term.
Are there any questions from the council on this resolution? Councilwoman Gaylord Baird, sorry.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Is this a renewal of a previous long-term contract, or is it a brand-new contract?
It's a brand-new one.
Okay, and was there a different provider in the first place, or is this a brand-new undertaking for this city?
This is a different contractor that we've had.
But you've had a contractor previous providing similar
Not with-
services?
Yes, yes.
Is there anything different about this contract than previous year's contracts that we should be aware of?
No, there is not.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Camp.
Now, I think there was a circumstance behind the bidding procedure here you might want to explain. If I'm remembering what we had at Public Building Commission, that this is different, I think, isn't it, than the one? At
This one is city, county, and PBC
Okay.
contract.
Yeah, and there'd been another bidder who had the contract before, and apparently they forgot to check a box. Or would you explain what happened there, please?
On that particular one,
That was part of this in the preliminary bids, was it not?
no. Oh, are you talking about the consent?
When we got the bids for the elevator maintenance.
This isn't for elevator, this is for fire sprinkler
Fire-
systems.
Oh, I'm sorry, for fire sprinklers, so we still had another, the prior provider, there were some last minute concerns or procedural.
No, not with this one, we didn't.
Okay,
I mean, I can go back and check.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't affect our vote, it's just, I wouldn't miss,
Just some background information.
yeah, so, okay, thank you.
Okay.
So anyone in the audience here to testify on this item? Seeing no one, we'll go to the next item. Thank you.
All right, next is item 5B, Comp Plan Conformance 18011, approving an amendment to the West O redevelopment plan by creating the West O Street Revitalization Project, which involves a series of improvements within the public rights-of-way generally located throughout the West O Street corridor.
Mr. Landis, welcome.
Thank you. Councilman Schob, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, the applicant in this case. And we bring to you something that the city's done in the past but has not had recent experience with because we've been out of this business for a while. And that is the use of a tax income and financing district. Not a specific project per se, like a building or whatever, but designate an area, not using bonds, but using the natural growth of valuation, and that growth in valuation is then spent inside the district for public benefits of one kind or another. The West O area, in fact, approached the Urban Development Department and said, what can we do to create more opportunity and tools in the West O area, the entryway corridor that it is? And upon reflection, we said this tool would work. They shared with their members talked with the neighborhoods, representatives and the businesses and the Urban Development Department jointly concluded this was a good idea. We've been to the Planning Commission. They voted 7-0 to support this. It is, in fact, a revitalization project. It excludes the 3 areas that have recently been projects, the Huva Pharma, the Nature's Way, the Sam Manzito piece. Its boundaries are not identical to the existing area that's been designated as blighted and substandard, because some of that was beyond the city boundaries, which wasn't a wise idea. And in fact, in conformance with the Business Association, we picked the boundaries that are described here and appear in your supported material. The resources that come to us will be that natural growth and valuation. In the first several years, it'll be very modest. But as it grows, it can grow into a situation in which you have 6 figures to spend for a neighborhood, or in this case, an entryways improvement. That was the experience on North 27th. That's an example of a project. The Havelock area had a district like this, and it was what produced park improvements and the facade improvements along Havelock Avenue and the parking opportunities there. That was an example of this idea in the Havelock area. We've also had one in North 48th Street and University Place area. None of those continue to exist, but this is using that same model and idea. The first thing that we do is to essentially get together with the neighborhood and with the Business Association and look for some design elements. Design elements that can tie the entire area together, share a sense of the streetscape. 69% of the land in this area have no sidewalks, for example. So there are things that need to be done and tied together. And then, as resources appeared, we would undertake executing that design. Here today is Randy Haas from T.O. Haas Tires. He's been the voice of the Business Association. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilwoman Lamb.
Yes, thank you. How long would the TIF be part of, or the funds from TIF be available, or what?
Legally, it's the same 15-year time window that you're familiar with.
Okay.
There is a way in which we could bring it to an end when we wish to, and there's a way legally that if we screw up in how we administer it, it would come to an end on its own. And that is if we didn't have an obligation or a contract into the next year or into the future. Our law department says if you have one of these districts and you don't have either debt or obligation, then the district comes to an end. So those are 3 ways: either the natural clock, or council action, or the management of it in such a way that we didn't have debt or obligation. And those would bring it to an end.
So am I understanding correctly that all natural growth and valuation in these areas would be off of generally collected taxes because they'd go to pay back this TIF for 15 years?
There's not a payback because there isn't a bond.
Gotcha.
They would be paying taxes. There is a difference. These taxes would be diverted, put into a pot, and the first claim on those monies would be for improvements in Westo.
Okay.
Now, in the event that's a manageable function. In the past, when these have operated, they've been successful and uninterrupted. But I'm going to guess that the council would continue to have the authority, if it wished to say, thank you, we've done enough. We're bringing it to an end. In other words, this authority, I think, is within the purview of the council to oversee.
But the county and the school would not be getting any portion of the...
Of the growth, that's right.
Okay. For up to 15 years.
For up to 15 years.
Okay.
Other questions? Councilman Kemp.
Because this will be a tax increment project, what is the valuation date you're going to use to determine the base before the increment's calculated?
It'll be this last January. We'd anticipate the division to be in, I just had a note. I can send you an email, but we would divide in 2019 and use January 1, 2018 as the base.
So that would include the increased valuation the assessor has put forth, or is that before that?
I'm not sure of the clock of that valuation change. What I can tell you is that the valuation date, which is when you set the date to divert, you set the base date. It operates that way just because that's the way it does. But my anticipation is that it'll be January 2018 as the base date.
I don't know if there's anyone here that could answer that question, because otherwise we know the commercial real estate, which is pretty much what's along this corridor, is part of all the revaluation, which was substantial. So, second question I have is on some of the envisioned improvements. So you talked about sidewalks, and I don't know if you, two questions. One, do you have an estimate or projection of what the overall TIF might generate in the money-wise, dollar-wise?
No, remember that you're betting on a 15 years of future. If you were to say a rough justice of the past, John, you might think in terms of 1 or 1.5% growth a year.
And so what would that yield?
We're talking about an area that is not as extensive or as expensive as North 27th, but I don't have an estimate for you to give you.
And some of the improvements besides sidewalks, are you envision things like medians on West O?
Remember, I think the place to start is with a design for an area that ties that together in relationship to the business association. But there's some things on the area. Signage might be an open question. Landscaping might be. Bus shelters might be. Sidewalks certainly might well be. Those are all things. Street lighting might be important. However, while those opportunities exist, the priority is really a reflection of the area's desire as well as the city's desire.
And my final question would be, who does the maintenance when this is all said and done? Will it be an endowment to pay for that future maintenance?
The area in the Westo area is covered by a BID that exists today. And so to the extent that there is some landscaping obligations, it would fall to the BID, which is an assessment practice, and not a general fund expense.
And so that go on in perpetuity, essentially?
Well, they do go on in perpetuity unless every now and then they get recreated, which is what's happened in the downtown BID recently. The state laws doesn't make it easy to change BIDs, and so on occasion they are brought to an end and recreated. But they do operate unless one of those interruptions occur in perpetuity.
Do we have a similar BID on the airport entry corridor?
I don't know of one.
That looks like a weed patch, unfortunately.
Well, and I don't know that there's a BID. I would have an experience with it because we bring them to the council for the equalization board effort that you make, I think, to approve the BID assessments. And I don't think you have a recollection of it, and I don't have a recollection of it. So I don't think there is one there.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lamb?
Thank you. So I have a little concern because typically when we get a project asking us for TIF, we have a plan. And it doesn't sound like we really have a plan. We don't have estimated cost. And so that's a little concerning to me. But my second concern, and I don't know, would future projects in this area be prohibited from qualifying for TIF?
No. You could change the boundaries of this area, and then let's imagine a new fresh employer with 1,000 jobs that was going to locate on Westo. But they said to us, we want a 15-year TIF clock. We can accommodate that. So by participating in this, we don't end the ability of development along this corridor. If I could just say a word about the idea of a design. This is an area who in fact brought this to us as much as we brought it to them. We would feel a very strong kinship with the business association and the area itself. We've always worked very closely with whatever the organization was in that, whether it was the Havelock Business Association or the North 27th Business Association. I think we want a design that grew as much from their perceptions as to what they wanted their street to be like as the city would. In other words, I think we are partners with Westo as opposed to telling them, we did your design, here it is, I hope you like it. I think we're going to work together to create that design. It may not be the way you'd choose to do it. It is the way in this relationship we're choosing to do it.
Other questions from the council? Mr. Landis, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone from the audience like to testify on this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. Several months ago, I gave you a letter that was sent to me by Senator Groney, who at that time was a member of the Urban Affairs Legislative Committee, in which he stated that the committee and the legislature are aware of abuse of TIFs in Lincoln, Nebraska. We feel that this is an abuse of the TIF, and we would urge the City Council to look into it further and to examine it before they make a decision to vote on it. So our recommendation is to postpone it and look into it further. The City of Lincoln has a reputation for abusing TIF, and now is a chance for you to step up to the plate and show that you will not be a participant in this. It sounds very vague to us. We would like more investigation before you make some decision to vote for it. It's using the taxpayers' money off the rolls, and we need all the money we can have to cover all of the elements of our budget. Thank you very much.
Is anyone else in the audience like to testify on this item?
I'm in favor of the amendment. Randy Haas, 9501 Firethorn Lane. I'm the president of the Westo Business Association, and we've been working with Dave Landis, Ernie Castillo at the Urban Development Department for approximately 15 years to improve the streetscape and the business conditions at Westo area. As Dave mentioned, we've had 3 large businesses now enter our area in the last year, and we're very pleased with that. Our 85 members have voted for the amendment of the redevelopment plan, as well as our board of our directors, and we certainly support working with Dave and his group to improve the Westo area.
Any questions? Yeah,
Yes. How long ago did your business locate on Westo, Randy?
1949, I believe it was.
Okay. And since that time, you've seen many improvements.
Correct.
But it's only gone so far. You know, there's more that you'd like to see and envision and that you dream about. What would some of those things be?
Yeah, well, there has been a TIF district in this area for quite a while, so this is nothing new. This is a change of the plan, and I think that more businesses could participate. For instance, with facade improvements and things like that. Being an entrance to the city, and the main entrance to the city from the west, we'd like to see streetscape improvement and just more businesses come to our area, be a better tax base for the city also.
I'm remembering 2-3 years ago, there was an economic study of retail opportunities and some business growth.
Right, we paid for that study, that's correct.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, Ms. Testifier? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else would like to speak on this item? Seeing no one coming forward, Teresa, we move to the next item, please?
Sure. Next would be item 5C, approving an interlocal agreement between the city and the Omaha Council Bluffs Metropolitan Area Planning Agency to obtain digital maps, including aerial photography and building footprints.
Good afternoon, council members. Steve Henderson with Information Services. This agreement provides a vehicle in which the city and county can acquire a variety of digital aerial imagery products. We use those for GIS, and some of the applications then within that GIS environment include things such as construction, public safety, emergency response, assessment. It's really a benefit to both the city and county. One of the things that's important about this new agreement is that in contrast to prior agreements, we are switching from an acquisition cycle of every 3 years that we do today to a cycle of every 2 years. Literally, the landscape of Lincoln and Lancaster County is changing frequently enough now that having that imagery more frequently is of benefit to nearly all of the consumers of this technology. The price for moving from that 3-year cycle to a 2-year cycle is approximately $3,000 per year more than it has been in the past. The cost for this is roughly $169,000 per year for a 6-year agreement, for each of a 6-year agreement. Those costs are split among the city and the county. The split is roughly 65% to the city and 35% to the county, although there are some small percentages that actually go to some other partners, Natural Resource District, University of Nebraska, a couple of other small participants. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions you might have.
Are there questions of this testifier? Is there anyone, no, I'm sorry, Councilman Camp.
Are there possible private vendors that already map the city and have aerial photography that we could leverage off of and save $1 million?
What our experience has been, this is sort of a two-phase agreement that happens here. We are actually entering into an agreement with MAPA, Metropolitan Area Planning Agency. But in fact, what MAPA does is contract with the private sector. They are working with a company that actually acquires this imagery over a much larger area than just Lincoln and Lancaster. So we're benefiting from their volume purchasing, and we acquire only those imagery products that we need for Lincoln and Lancaster. So that volume purchasing would make it quite a challenge for anyone else to be able to meet those kinds of pricing.
Have you inquired of any?
MAPA's done bidding on this, and this is the result of this bidding process. So.
But from Lincoln's standpoint?
Not from Lincoln's point of view, no. Our observation anecdotally is the prices we get through this process far exceed anything we've ever heard mentioned in terms of direct acquisition of the imagery here.
Could you pay a license fee to someone like Google Maps or something?
We've explored that, and the imagery from Google Maps doesn't provide some of the detail that is needed for some of the uses of this data. It doesn't have quite all the features that we acquire when we acquire it in this manner.
Other questions from the council? Is there anyone in the audience here to testify on this item? Thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa, our next item, please.
All right, next is item 5D, approving an agreement between the city and Windstream Enterprise to provide SIP trunks for external telecommunications for the city-county VoIP system.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. This contract is indeed with Windstream, and let me just give you a very quick explanation of what this really does. Many of you recall the city and the county implemented our own internal VoIP phone system starting in the latter part of 2012. You really should think of that VoIP system as a very large and sophisticated computer program that happens to have telephones attached to the end of it. It's now at a point where we need to upgrade that phone system and the attendant software and hardware that runs that system. And as part of that upgrade, that's not what this contract is about, but as part of that upgrade, we will now have a new capability to take advantage of some different technology, some new technology that connects our VoIP environment to the telecommunication world outside of Lincoln and Lancaster County. So an easy example is for purposes of long distance. This contract puts us in a position where as we acquire that new technology, it will reduce the cost of that specific technology by about 30%. And then for the long-distance volume that goes across that technology, we will be able to dramatically reduce that cost by about 80%. Now, the city and county don't expend huge amounts of money on long distance. It's about $40,000 to $45,000 per year. But it would be a dramatic reduction in that cost if we put in place this new technology.
Questions from the council? I'd like you just to say one time what the acronym VoIP stands for.
Voice over Internet Protocol.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is anyone in the audience like to testify on this item? Seeing no one, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item, please.
Item 5E, approving an agreement between the city, the West Haymarket JPA, and TDP Phase 1 LLC, whereby TDP Phase 1 LLC agrees to refund a portion of the TIF proceeds and rescinding the requirement that TDP Phase 1 continues to operate a public market space as part of the redevelopment project.
Is there someone here to testify on this item? Yes, there he is.
I think I'm the first, perhaps two applicants. I think there's both comments from myself and the law department
Didn't see you
as well.
standing there, I'm sorry.
It's okay. David Landis, Urban Development Department Director. In the redevelopment agreement with the rail yards, if you will, the TDP Phase 1, there was an innovative element suggested by the developer and agreed to by the city to create a recognition of a public market for which $400,000 of the TIF was expended to the developer for the creation of the public market. The public market had a particular intent. First intent was to create a public space, a place where people could use the restrooms, sit down, relax, get warm if it was in the winter, get cool if it was in the summer. But the second part of that space was a public market, and the public market was designed to be an extension of the farmers market, in which Lincoln has a very positive reaction to the farmers market. It's well attended, and it's a very standard part of our downtown experience. The hope was that some of the farmers market's entities would have a desire to create a permanent space, develop a clientele, a steady clientele, and then perhaps spin off to their own locations. So the idea was to create this permanent farmers market, mini market, and to be an incubator for future business. Innovative idea. We thought it was a good idea. The developer thought it was a good idea. We invested $400,000 in it. There was modest success. I'd have to say modest. The Normandy restaurant at 70th South started in the public market. Katie's Designs, which is next to Scooters and Jewelry, started in the farmers market. The Donut Hole started in the farmers market, in the public market rather. But those were the last successful ventures, and it's been tried now for about 5 years. We're down to some nonprofit popcorn and some liquor slushies. And if you were to read the language of the redevelopment agreement, that's not what we were after, and it hasn't been for a good long while. The developer's done things to try to engender interest. They've done things with their rent and their agreements. I can't describe them for you. That would be for the developer to speak to if you wish to. I think Tom Houston's there on their behalf. But here's what we would say as the Urban Development Department. We are not now in a place where the purpose for which we extended the $400,000 is being met. And I think there's a recognition on our part, and I think the developer would agree that they've tried it long enough and arduously enough that it's not likely to be there. So the public purpose for which we extended the TIF doesn't exist anymore, or it's just not there in a proportion that seems reasonable, and we're asking for those monies to be brought back, so that there is an agreement to repay the money that was extended to them for what is now this date forward for the rest of the TIF clock. That money would come back to the JPA, and I think the uses that would be spent would be to reduce the debt as opposed to being spent for some other purpose. I think they wind up being proceeds that you would apply and shorten the payment of bond proceeds, because I think they'll be applied in that way. We would say that while the public space has been there, the public market has not succeeded, and the public benefit on both sides of the equation, ourselves and the developer, would say it's not likely to be there, and we're asking to be repaid, and this is an agreement to that effect.
Thank you. Are questions from the council? Is there anyone in the audience that'd like to testify on this item?
Mr. Chair, I'd heard there was somebody who had a 4 o'clock appointment that might be here, and I don't know if we could accommodate that individual if he or she is still here. I believe the name was Catlett. Is that person here?
I think there's a young man in the back motioning that he's good.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Would you come forward? Thank you.
Tim C, City Law Department. I'll try to be brief. There were just a couple things that have been brought to the council's attention, a couple of questions that I think have been raised that are worth addressing ahead of time. One, there is a suggestion out there that there's maybe some third-party beneficiaries to this contract. Our analysis of that is that the third-party beneficiary rule of contracts would not apply in this situation. But in any event, I think the concern, or one of the large concerns raised by the third parties, is that the use restrictions that would otherwise be in place for the rail yard area would somehow be not apply to the public market area. That's not the case. The use restrictions for the public market area would be the same as all other tenants in the rail yard area. So I just wanted to clear that up quickly. And then there is a question that's been raised briefly with respect to the bond proceeds. That is, those going back to the JPA is by our analysis a requirement of the bond ordinance. The bond ordinance requires that or pledge the revenue from the project, which includes both the tax revenue as well as any project revenue. We think that the definition of project revenue is broad enough to include settlement amounts, or in this case, simply repayment of the principal. And so those funds would go back to pay principal and interest on the bonds that are outstanding at this point in time. Those are just two of the questions that were put out there. And with that, I guess I'd be happy to answer any other questions the council might have.
Councilman Camp.
Mr. C, I had gotten some information from Mr. Landis a while back, and I guess I'm confused. There were bonds obviously involved with tax increment financing, and it appeared there were 4 bonds. Or could you, I guess basically what I'm interested in, could you explain the bond makeup? Could you explain who bought the bonds? Could you explain the principal amount for each bond? Could you explain the percentage interest charge? And finally, is the payment, where the payments are currently, whether it's on course, underfunded, or whatever?
I wish I could tell you if they're on payment or not. Those we'd have to talk to the finance department to determine whether or not they are up to date with respect to payments on the bonds. So I simply don't have that information, Councilman Camp. I can get that for you. That shouldn't be too difficult. With respect to who purchased the bonds, as I understand this agreement, there was a structure set up wherein there were 2 components of the project, I guess I would describe. There was the rail yard component on the east side of Canopy, and then I believe there was a structure on the west side of Canopy Street, including a hotel, if I'm not mistaken. Both of those were set up to each have the ability to issue 2 sets of bonds, and the JPA purchased the Series A bond that came out of both the rail yard component and the hotel component, and then the developer purchased the Series B bonds, which would be a second priority lien or a second priority bond on those 2 properties. This money would go to pay back part of the JPA bond that was acquired by the West Haymarket JPA. And so that's my understanding of the structure of the bonds. Interest rates, I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top of my head. Amounts, how it was split up. I guess I hate to just dismiss all of your questions.
It might be urban development.
Urban development has more information than I do. It appears that total TIF for the project was $7,385,000. You
said 7,395?
7,385.
Thank you.
This is for the residential, the plaza, and the hotel. and there was 4.5 million for the, $4.5 million for the rail yard component, as I understand this.
So a total of 11,800,000?
Approximately.
Or
Go for it if you want to.
we're hearing from.
Sorry, Councilman.
No.
Sorry, I'm shoving an exhibit in his face. Hallie Salem Urban Development Department. So the Exhibit B from the redevelopment agreement explains two different sets of bonds. So for the residential retail office project, the RRO, there was a Series A bond for $3.5 million, which was funded by the JPA, and a Series B bond for $1 million, funded by the developer. And the total then for the RRO project was $4.5 million. And then for the hotel project, it was also broken out, as Tim was saying, into a Series A and Series B. And the Series A was $2.25 million, and then the Series B was $635,000, for a total of $2.885 million. All, both projects together totaled that $7,385,000.
Okay. And so, a couple of things, you're saying there's 4.5 million for the rail yard side, and so that's where, I guess I'd never previously seen an allocation of 400,000 to the public market. Was that
Right.
specifically identified in the agreement?
Yes, and I can show you that.
Okay.
This fifth priority, showing $400,000 specifically for the construction of the public market and interior tenant finishes.
Okay. And just some other preliminary questions, we'll let the testifiers ask them, but, so on the bonds, the interest rate on the Series A is how much?
I don't have that at my fingertips, but it was a different percent rate than the private side. I believe it was under 4%. I don't know that number exactly, but we can find that.
If I'm not mistaken, well, Mr. Landis was kind to send me some amortization schedules, and if I recall correctly, I didn't print them off, but Series A was 5%, so that'd be to the West Haymarket JPA. And to the developer, it was 10%, twice as much.
Mm.
And I don't know if Mr. Landis can help me on that. I thought that's what I read. I think it's an important element here. And then also, Ms. Salem, do you know the amortization, which are ahead and which are behind in being paid off?
I don't have that at my fingertips, but I will find that out for you.
Yeah. And it's my understanding that some of those are not current, so.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the council of these testifiers? Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to testify to this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. I would like to be sworn in before I give my testimony.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
We are in support of the TIF refund, and we have further recommendations based on information that we have had. It is surprising that the public market ever went forward. It was a nice idea, but promise was not implemented properly. Watchdogs visited several companies that had contracts with PDP during a few months after the rail yard opened. These tenants were very unhappy with the Scott's management and failure to listen to their financial needs, an important element in a contract between a landlord and a tenant. Several owners at times called me concerning this, even after I visited. and one even asked if federal money had been used so that they could find out federal rules which they felt were not being followed. I told them that we did not have that information. Of course, managers cannot treat unhappy tenants this way for very long before they leave, as some of the later tenants did, including the Normandy, and or legal efforts had been brought forth by some of the other tenants that the Scotts had, not particularly in the public market, but down in their rail yard. We think it is fair to say that TDP Phase 1, aka WRK Management, for William D. and Robert E. Scott, has a reputation of difficulties in their management style. It would be wise for the council to have more hands-on control regarding this issue, so that continuation of TIF or reuse of TIF funds, which are public monies, can be used in the best interest of Lincoln's residents and businesses. It appears only developers who seek for approval for TIF funds are automatically assigned them. Watchdogs expects, and the public wants, more careful management of their tax money. This agenda item is a warning for a change of behavior. There is a cliche which holds as a reminder for the council. A word to the wise is sufficient. I hope that you will be more hands-on in the future when you hand out TIFs and also when you monitor TIFs. Maybe you have to give that to some staff, but even at that, staff should listen to what you have to say.
Thank you. Are there questions for this testifier? Are there anyone else from the audience who'd like to speak to this item?
Members of the council.
No. I'm sorry, that was me, yeah.
Andrew Willis, Klein Williams, representing TDP Phase 1 LLC. The general settlement agreement has been laid out for you. Really, the public market was a new concept, an interesting concept. $400,000 of the TIF was specifically allocated to that public market improvements, as already stated. It's 5 years in. It's realized now that this hasn't worked out as planned, and again, the goal here, the responsible goal, is to pay back the remaining TIF that would be collected from that, $266,000, 2/3 of that, and effectively remove very specific restrictions that were allocated specifically towards the public market piece. This wouldn't change anything else, any of the other restrictions within the redevelopment agreement. It's only, there's a section B of there's the Plaza and Cube license agreement that lays out the specifics of the public market. The main piece of that is, or at least the one that we were looking at, was that no more than 25% of that public market space can be occupied by a single owner. That would be removed. All of the other restrictions, as far as use restrictions in the rail yard, would remain in place. As of now, the landlord doesn't have we don't know what that use is going to be, but it would be subject to all of the same restrictions that exist in the rail yard right now, with all the other tenants in place, except for that very specific, that section B of that plaza and license agreement. Everything else remains in place. And I guess I just wanted to preemptively, I anticipate there's going to be some more opposition from the tenants. The concerns that are coming from the tenants are really landlord-tenant issues. This is an agreement between the JPA, the city, and TDP Phase 1. I acknowledge we probably will have to talk about these landlord-tenant issues, but this is not the forum for that. It really doesn't have an effect on this agreement itself. Those are lease issues. Again, this is an agreement between the city, the JPA, and the TDP Phase 1. It's already actually been, it was passed in 2012, 2013. It was amended once already by this body in 2015, obviously with no tenant input, no tenant approval rights. Those rights don't exist, excuse me, and haven't ever been enforced before. There's no legal ability to enforce that. Again, that doesn't discount the landlord-tenant issues that may exist that we may have to address, but again, it's not the appropriate forum and really shouldn't apply to this hearing.
Councilman Christensen.
Just so everyone here knows, and so you know, that it's my intention during the voting session to move this be delayed until August 6th. And part of the reasoning behind that is to be able to deal with some of these issues, perhaps in a different format, perhaps later, but this delay would include continued public hearing. Do you have any comment on that action?
I would ask that we don't delay this and again, from the landlord's perspective, we already agreed to one delay. This was initially going to be scheduled for June 18th, this public hearing, and we agreed based on a request from Yard Investments, Mr. Hunziker, on their behalf to delay it until now. So we've already waited 3 weeks, and they want to. And again, now they're asking for another month on top of that. And so I guess we would request that we don't delay this any further, that there's an action so that TDP Phase 1 can move forward one way or another.
Is there any direct harm that would accrue to you and your clients if this were delayed?
The harm is in the scheduling. I mean, really, the effective scheduling in that area is coming in the fall, football season. And so the delay, again, we don't know. I suppose it depends on what the vote is, what the public market's going to, what the landlord's going to try to do with the public market. But they can't make any decisions on that until this vote happens. And the continued delay, just if we go into August, then they need to start figuring out, formulating a plan after that. And it just really the effective lease season starts mid-August, and there's just no time after that. We're already probably pushing that time frame pretty hard and behind as it is. So yes, there is harm to the landlord.
Councilman Camp.
Yes, Mr. Willis, I appreciate your. Now, is your client going to appear, or are you just the sole?
I think you have me today, unfortunately.
Okay, well, good. Does your client feel in asking for this change on the public market that it's used good faith efforts to make the public market work?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's, and again, what's the request is returning TIF money that hasn't, because it hasn't worked. I mean, the alternative is to that TDP Phase 1 can continue to collect those TIF dollars as they come in for the next 10 years with that restriction in place. Obviously, the goal there is to benefit the entire rail yard area and the community by making the property better, opening up those restrictions, but ultimately to not continue to take TIF in where it didn't work. But yes, so the idea of that $400,000 in the public market was to ultimately bring down those rents in that area. These are small spaces, again, kind of the extension of the farmer's market. You're buying a booth or a kiosk and using that as the area. After that was started, they reduced, the TDP Phase 1 ended up reducing rents significantly further.
Could you define what the reduction was?
And I don't have those numbers, I do apologize.
Could you suggest maybe
50% probably a reduction.
Was it like $100 a square foot to $50 a square foot?
I don't know those numbers.
And would you understand that maybe they also then, when they reduce it to $50 a square foot, which there's no place in Lincoln that charges that amount, but regardless, then they said they wanted a percentage of the gross? No, this was brought out in a letter that the council received from one of the other tenants.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know that, I guess, to define the space a little better, and again, I'm not sure, I don't have those numbers, but again, if you're leasing out, the idea was if the way this was supposed to work, and the reason why this was this new concept is you lease out, say, 500 square feet of space for the business. What you're getting with that is the kind of combined kitchen area that you could, the storage and kitchen, so that was not really included in your lease space. You got all the seating that was that seating that was communal for all those places in the public market, the public restrooms that were there. So you weren't leasing that space that you would otherwise be leasing. And again, that was the idea of bringing that rent down by leasing less space. And also just the idea of the synergy similar to a farmer's market. That synergy just never existed, and that was kind of the downfall of the place.
Do you think the rents could have been too high, though? I mean, one of the purposes of the TIF was to allow lower rents, and $100 a square foot is not low.
I don't have that number. I don't know if it was $100 a square foot. I don't think that's right, but I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I apologize. But it's possible. They reduced rents probably about 50%, and still that didn't beyond the initial reduced rents that were set up. And so even with that reduction, it didn't.
That information, since it appears that we'll have a delay, so we have something to
Sure.
deal with on this. I guess my concern is your clients are saying they tried to operate the public market, which was an important element in doing the overall project, but if they didn't use good faith efforts and they were charging outrageous rents, the new people moving from farmers market to pay that kind of rent, even on 500 square feet, is exorbitant, and so you're doomed to fail. And yet, so I'm just really concerned about the underlying efforts there, and then now to introduce more alcohol into the rail yard and.
I can find out that information. I don't know. I guess as far as the rent structure, again, it's always apples to oranges when you're comparing this. This public market space was set up as gross leases, so they weren't paying any of the CAM charges that any other tenant was paying. All the other tenants are on triple net leases.
If we could have the data, I think that would enlighten us.
Okay. Well, yes, I can get that, but ultimately. I guess ultimately from the landlord's perspective is this system was set up, the market was set up, and when it did not succeed to get to the point of good faith, yes, I believe there was good faith in reducing those rents, trying different ways to get tenants, and it just ultimately hasn't proved fruitful. I mean, at some point you could reduce the rents more, but they still have to operate, and I suppose the conclusion as far as you can go is reducing them to zero, but that just doesn't work. They have a right to charge a rent, and so.
Well, they got $7.385 million in TIF for these.
And that's why this is very specifically only for redealing with that $400,000. That the redevelopment agreement was allocated out, and so this really only addresses that $400,000 was used to bring these down. And I guess I would just reiterate again this. While it's not a good situation, obviously my clients wished it would have worked out, this would have succeeded as they expected, but at this point, this seems to be the responsible action to return, to pay back that TIF, rather than to continue collecting that TIF on something that did not seem to work as intended.
I think when we see the rent numbers, then we can now evaluate whether it was a good faith effort.
Councilwoman Raybold.
Andrew, can you, if we go forward with this settlement to your client, does that mean the landlord can now, no longer has to adhere to the agreement of offering a public market so that he can redevelop that whole area of larger spaces to maybe a bigger sized tenant?
Yeah, that would be the main restriction that would be removed, is that right now there's that no one owner can occupy more than 25% of the space in the public market area, and that would be the main thing that would be removed. So yes, that entire area could be leased to one tenant. It could be changed. That would be the restriction that would be removed. All of the other restrictions in the redevelopment agreement, as far as uses and everything else, would remain the same. But yes, that would be the one thing that would change. I don't know what the plan is, and it probably depends a lot on what this vote is before they can figure out what that plan is going to be, but that would be one alternative that doesn't exist right now.
So I guess what some of the letters that we've received from the other tenants they're concerned that alters dramatically, I guess, the proposition of the public market that they had bought into themselves.
I guess I would think that the story of reliance they're telling doesn't seem accurate to me. Again, this is $400,000 of TIF out of almost $7.4 million. It's 5% roughly. The existing piece of the rail yard that exists, even if that restriction goes away, you've got the rail yard area, that's, the skating rink during the winter, the gathering place during the summer. You've got the cube, which brings in those, events and the things that are happening there. The pieces that would remain, even if this restriction is removed of the public market, that part of that TIF paid for, the public restrooms, again, the idea that you're down in the rail yard, and, this may not go to the tenant's point, but, part of the public aspect is you're down in the rail yard, you have public restrooms there. So if you're sitting there, you don't have to go into a bar, into that establishment to use the restroom. You have those. That was one of the public aspects of it. That will still exist. That won't go away. So some of that will still remain. I think that and again, I don't know what that public market area will look like, but I think whatever the changes in that area could be aren't substantially what was driving. The rail yard will still be the same. It will still have, the main gathering space, the idea that entertainment district that was the first, that whole area will still exist as it exists now.
I think what they're saying is that some of these restrictions don't expire even when the tax increment financing period expires, and that they run with the land. And so I guess, does this give the landlord an opportunity then to go back to those tenants and charge them for all those public areas that were part of the TIF?
And that's actually incorrect. That was a statement in that letter that was incorrect. In the again, this is the Plaza Cube license agreement that we would be deleting Exhibit B from, and in that Exhibit B, it specifically says that the public market use restrictions shall terminate on the date, which is 15 years following the effective date of the tax increment provision. So at most, these are running for 15 years. And the idea, and again, if you look at the redevelopment agreement, the tax increment period is defined in the redevelopment agreement as a 15-year period, or it's really the sooner of 15 years or when the TIF indebtedness is paid back. The idea here is, it's akin to if you came in and paid back the entire, if it was a smaller project or something, and you paid back the entire TIF amount, then the entire redevelopment obligations would go away. It's just in this case, we've allocated out that specific public market piece, and so we're looking to do the exact same thing, but only on that one piece. So those restrictions, even if this settlement agreement is not approved, they terminate, all those public market restrictions terminate in 10 years from now, regardless. So those do not run in perpetuity.
Other questions from the council? Is there anyone else here to testify on this item? If you wish to testify on the item, we do have 2 microphones. You can come forward, just kind of get in the queue, sign up, and be ready to go. You can do that now.
Apologize, I had some language I wanted to be able to read to you. So good afternoon, my name is Ann Post. I'm an attorney with Baylor Ebden Law Firm, and I'm here today on behalf of Yard Investments LLC that does business in the rail yard as Gate 25. And so really, to summarize the issues that bring us here today, a quick summary is this. TDP made a deal with the city. My clients relied on that deal when they brought their business to the rail yard, and now TDP is asking this council to make unprecedented changes to that deal without consulting my client. And so when I say deal, I'm talking about the use restrictions. Now I want to break that down a little bit because we've had a lot of talk about it, but it's not entirely clear. This area is subject to 2 sets of use restrictions. First is a set that's included in the redevelopment agreement. These are the use restrictions that say the property can't be used for gambling, they can't be used for retail sales of tobacco. They contain restrictions on basically how many bars can be in the rail yard, among other things, hours of operation and that. These apply to the whole rail yard in general. Second is a set of use restrictions contained in the licensing agreement. And this is section B that applies only to the public market area. Now, it's all of these restrictions together that my client relied on when they brought their business to the rail yard. It's these restrictions that really shape the marketplace. They shape what businesses are there, what customers are brought to the rail yard, and who my client's competitors are. Now, the settlement agreement, in my opinion, which is obviously not the opinion of everyone here, but removes both sets of restrictions. Now, so the language I wanted to share with you today, if you go to the settlement agreement that we're looking at, it's all of 4 pages. There's 3 very important paragraphs, and paragraph 2 says, the restrictions on the use of the public market set forth in both the redevelopment agreement and the licensing agreement are hereby terminated. That the company shall have the right to use the space previously occupied by the public market for any use permitted under zoning regulations. Now, I can't read that in a way that keeps the use restrictions that are in the redevelopment agreement in place. It sounds like there's people who would disagree with that. But to that extent, that's why we need a continued dialogue. If that truly is the case, we could make that very clear in this settlement agreement that those use restrictions are going to be in place, where it is not clear as of now. There's also been questions as to whether what right my clients have to enforce this agreement at all. There's been talk about third-party beneficiary issues, how these run with the land. So, and this has been characterized as just a landlord-tenant issue that should be handled between the parties. However, why it's not is because of the nature of the redevelopment agreement. This agreement isn't just between the city and the JPA and TDP. This is an agreement between the city and the JPA and the owners of the real estate. And by its specific language, it is every person having a fee or other interest in the real estate. My clients have a lease that is an other interest in the real estate. Therefore, they're entitled to rely on the use restrictions and to enforce the use restrictions if they need to. Finally, I think I'm running out of time, but I will say it sounds like we have some questions about the efforts to implement the public market concept, which it sounds like you're very well aware of. So I won't belabor that point as I run out of time. And the other issue we wanted to highlight is just the issue of the communication that has gone on throughout this process, or the lack thereof. My office has been in direct communication with the parties to this agreement for several months, and at no point have we ever been able, despite our numerous efforts to reach out and discuss, have we been able to sit down and actually discuss our differences on this, to talk about language that might make satisfy everyone's needs. And so, though we've continuously requested this dialogue, it hasn't happened. So finally, my clients are obviously interested in the success of this area. We need it to succeed so that my client's business succeeds. We're not interested in keeping these restrictions no matter the effect on the rail yard as a whole. But what we are demanding today is to have a voice in the discussion, and that the use restrictions that we've relied on and that are the success of our business relies on, stay in place and not be removed without our input and consent.
Thank you. Next, I'm sorry, Councilman Camp.
Well, your last message, you're saying you'd like to see the use restrictions there, so how does that affect alcohol service? Would that prohibit the alcohol service in this public market area?
Yeah, so the alcohol service is a restriction that is in the redevelopment agreement. So that's that first set that's generally applicable to the rail yard as a whole. And under our reading of this settlement agreement, this settlement agreement removes that as far as the public market area is concerned. It's on the redevelopment or the rest of the rail yard as a whole, but removes it for the public market area. And so that would mean that there is the potential that someone could go into that space and start selling alcohol, and more importantly, start selling alcohol directly onto the yard. You know, our clients, when they entered into the lease to have their business in this area, they looked at the use restrictions, and these are what assured them that they would be one of only 2 businesses that could sell alcoholic beverages directly into the yard area. So with that use restriction not in place in the public market, this opens it up to more competition in that for that business that could have a seriously detrimental effect on my client's business.
Okay. What about the food requirements? I think, weren't there something overall that affected all of the tenants?
Yes, there are food requirements. Let's see. There are food requirements. Those are included in the overall requirements for the sale of alcohol. and removing those, I mean, it would affect it. I guess I'm trying to answer your question. I'm not sure I did a great job. Can you,
Well,
what
I'm
else
just
do you need
wondering,
from me?
Well, and I've heard that some of those requirements haven't even been upheld in the past, that there may have been some more alcohol-only sales or something.
I'm not sure exactly how those have been upheld in the past. What I can tell you right now is we've got our definition in this redevelopment agreement of the square footage of retail space that can have above 50% of their gross sales from in the sale of alcohol, and that there are restrictions that they have to have a licensed kitchen, and their licensed kitchen has to be open between certain hours. For those 66 2/3% of the square footage of the retail space that can have more than 50% of their business from the sale of alcohol, that's where the kitchen, the licensed kitchen requirement comes into play. So.
May need to look at that a little bit.
Okay.
I guess my final question would be, one of the, I guess the owners of Gate 25, your client, had
Yes.
sent information to us, and which went to the, I think part of it to the issue of, has the public market concept been, good faith effort, as I was asking Mr. Willis earlier. He may have left, but, and in that letter, there was representation that there were like $100 square foot rents or something. Did you visit with that owner, or do you know those figures?
Yes. My client is basing their calculation on the rent that they know was paid by the donut hole that was in that space. The donut hole was paying $71.15 per square foot for their space in the public market. Now, in some basic research of other spaces available in the Haymarket, turned up listing rents of between $15 per square foot and $22 per square foot. So while we acknowledge that there is some change to be accounted for between the CAM charges, like Mr. Willis talked about, as well as apples to oranges with the very small space to a larger space, we're also talking about the difference between $71 per square foot and $15 per square foot. And so that amount, there's a tremendous difference between those numbers, and really leaves room to question whether those were low affordable rates or not for this space in the public market.
Other questions for this testifier? Thank you.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else like to speak to this item?
Hello, if I may. I'm Matt Catlett. I'm counsel for Bar at the Yard. I'm an attorney in Lincoln. I wish to echo Ms. Post's comments, and I'm sure all members of this body have read the letter from Mr. Hunziker. So I guess I don't want to say the same things, but regarding the food, I think there was a question about the food restrictions. It was consumable foods were to make up at least 65% of the public market, no fast food. The public market is not a failure of ideas. We believe it is a failure of execution. We believe that there has not been good faith by TDP Phase 1 in terms of the rents that have been offered. We know what this is really all about. I think what happened 7 or 8 months ago was that there was some liquor license application that was made by an organization that was essentially the property manager of TDP Phase 1. And until it sort of became clear that, wait a minute, this would violate the entire redevelopment agreement and the amendments. And so the application was withdrawn. We think that this is really just, that's what this is about. This is about, we don't think that TDP Phase 1's argument is a self-interested argument here, that that it doesn't have, its incentives are to make sure that the public market doesn't succeed, so that it can come in and offer to, pay back, refund this money. We just don't think that there is any putting the genie back in the bottle in this situation. We don't think that that this settlement agreement, I agree with the comments in Ms. Post, that the way it's written, it does, I've heard comments about the restrictions and they would remain in effect, but the way it's written, it wouldn't. At least, and I'm a lawyer and I read contracts, and so, I mean, the way it is written doesn't seem to jive with some of the remarks that have been made up here as far as the use restrictions in the public market remaining. We don't think that this settlement agreement realistically benefits anybody other than TDP Phase 1. And, you know, we just don't want to, this is just going to be converted into a big alcohol free-for-all, and I think we all understand what's going on here. So that's it. I'm available to answer any questions.
Any questions for this testifier? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Did sign in, correct? Yes.
Hi, I'm Jeff Gallion. I am one of the principal owners of Yard Investments, which does business as Gate 25 in the rail yard. I would like to first address some of the things that were, some of the issues that were brought up by some of the proponents. One of the suggestions and one of the things that was bounced around is that the tenants don't have standing to raise this issue. The city attorney's office brought up the issue of third-party beneficiaries to a contract. That's not the issue. The issue is whether this runs with the land, similar to covenants in a neighborhood where you become an owner after the fact, or you're a tenant subject to covenants. It's an issue similar to that. So there's language in the redevelopment agreement that specifically deals with parties that have an interest in the land. There's language talking about it running with the land. So that's where the right to enforce those comes from. There's been a couple people talk about the fact that the use restrictions will be the same as the other tenants. I don't think that's true the way this settlement agreement is written. There's one sentence that basically covers that, and it says the restrictions on the use of the public market set forth in the redevelopment agreement and license agreement are hereby terminated. Well, there's two sets of restrictions as you've heard. The license agreement restrictions, that set has to deal with local Nebraska-based goods, small tenant spaces, low rent. No tenant has more than 25%. The redevelopment agreement provisions, that's where you find the provisions that talk about businesses having a licensed kitchen, a full menu from 5 to 8, being open Monday through Saturday from 11 to 8, and 66 2/3% of the retail space being occupied by businesses whose predominant sales are the sales of alcohol. So those provisions that all the rest of the rail yard would be subject to would also be eliminated by this settlement agreement. So really, if they want to eliminate those, they should pay back the entire $7 million or $4.5 million or whatever's owed at this point, because those provisions go to the entire thing. They don't go to simply the public market. Just talking about the continuance itself, it's true that we were granted a continuance. That was to June 25th, when Mr. Hunsicker could be here. The proponents moved this, or someone moved it to today's date when he couldn't be. So we would appreciate the opportunity to move this when he can be here, and the next time he can be here other than the budget meeting is the 7th or the 6th. There's been some discussion about the rent price. I think you've all seen my correspondence on that. It considers the CAM issue. It considers the issue of the joint space that all the tenants have the benefit of using. Those numbers are still grossly high. The donut hole is owned by one of my partners in Yard Investments, and he couldn't be here today, but he asked me to relay to you that yes, at one point he was paying a reduced rent, and that reduced rent would figure out to still at about $30 a square foot, still about double the price of what would be a low rent rate.
1 minute.
Thank you. And he relayed to me that even at that price, he would still be a tenant, but the landlord bumped his rent back up to $4,500 a month, which is the $71 a square foot, when he no longer allowed the sale of alcohol from his premises by another tenant, which was the handshake deal the landlord made at the time to reduce that rent. So we believe that there's certainly tenants out there that would be in the premises at a reduced rent. At the low rents that the agreement provided for, we think that you would have tenants lining up to go in there and make a run at making that place work. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this testifier? Councilman Camp.
And I appreciate, I quoted some numbers out of your letter, and I guess I misquoted saying $100 a square foot, but 71 was higher. Where were the CAM charges? Were there common area maintenance costs assessed to this area in addition to those charges, or how did that work?
There were not. There were no CAM charges assessed to the public market. Those were gross leases. The CAM charges, I would tell you that from my experience, I review a lot of commercial leases every year. A reasonable CAM charge for a commercial space might be in the area of $5 a square foot. So you can take $5 off the $71, and we're still a long ways from 15.
Now, I believe since you're part owner there was a lawsuit a while back on the common area costs that they were like 2/3 of the rent or something. Could you refresh my memory on that?
They were a very large figure, and I don't have that in front of me. The issue there was trying to get an audit of those figures so that we could see how we reached those numbers, but I'm not sure what those numbers were.
Did you ever get that audit?
We finally got a judge that granted that order, and we're entitled to it. I'm not certain if we've received that or not, but I believe we have.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Someone else to testify on this item?
Hello, my name is Ed George. I live at 1130 H Street here in Lincoln. I want to address this whole issue we're talking about. I represent 2% of the population in our country, which are farmers. Let's think about what this originally area we were talking about. What was it originally called? The hay market. The hay market was a distribution point for production coming to Lincoln for further distribution farther outward. So it was like the hay came to this area. It was loaded on rail cars and shipped out. Then all of a sudden I started realizing what was happening. The farmer's market term became prominent down there. Producers brought their produce to sell to the people in the area, whatever that may be. Now I'm starting to hear the term product market, and I'm becoming more confused about what that area really represents historically. Is it originally the farmer's area, which it probably was at one time? Now we start talking about square footage, the value of that square footage. What would happen if a youngster said, I've got a garden here in Lincoln that I want to sell produce on my street? What would be the implications for that? Establishing a business. Let's start thinking about what this really represents. Do you want this to be known as the products market area, where the retailing of whatever product it may be will create the greatest revenue for everybody involved in Lincoln? It just seems like it's becoming so complicated. I understand you representing the people in your districts. I don't know which one of you represents the Haymarket area as a city councilman, but think about that. Farmers market was originally the Haymarket. Now it's becoming the produce market. 2% of us are left. We're going to try to feed the world, aren't we? And that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Mr. Camp.
Mr. George, I guess so are you in support of the public market or letting?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I know a farmer from my York County area that brings produce down here to Lincoln. It gives him an advertising opportunity to promote his production in his area. And this is happening throughout the area. People coming from Falls City, wherever they may be producing those produce. The farmer's market is the new concept. Urban agriculture is the new concept. And so the agricultural setting is shifting dramatically from that area. And it's important, I'll address it in another issue coming up here on the council's meeting today, but think about what you really want to represent the state of Nebraska is people. People made Nebraska what it is today, historically and present. So I support the farmers market. It also supports other businesses downtown that are there on a daily basis, even into the night business sector. So it's all important, it's all interacting. I welcome your comment. I think that's important, and we need to think about what urban agriculture really is anymore and what the future holds for the people that are working towards that sustainable agriculture in an urban agricultural setting.
Other questions? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to testify on this item?
I have a question for staff then. From Dave Landis.
Mr. Landis?
So let us just assume for a moment that this has passed the council and we have $400,000 coming back. What will be the disposition of those funds?
They would go against, or essentially pay for the bonds that are out there, reducing the length of time by $267,000, those last payments, because they'd be cut off having had this money infused at this time rather than waiting the rest of that time.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of Mr. Landis? Yes, I'm sorry. Councilman
Will we
Randall.
incur a penalty for paying off the bonds slightly early? That section,
Not that I know of.
Thank you. Anyone else? Teresa, can we go to our next item now?
Yes, item 5F, approving the 5-year strategic plan for HUD entitlement programs, identifying community development activities to be carried out using CDBG funds, home and emergency solutions grant funds.
When it rains, it pours.
I'll call the next one with that, which is approving the fiscal year 2018 annual action plan.
So that's 5F and 5G, correct?
Yes.
Could you hold a moment, please?
This takes care of,
Quick. Didn't offer a rebuttal. I did not. We might should have a rebuttal.
It's been brought to my attention that for that last resolution, I should have given the attorney a chance for rebuttal or some, yes, Mr. Landis a chance to rebuttal.
all right.
Mr.
The
C.
piece that I think is there that needs to be clear, thank you,
Tag-
you bet.
Mr. C's
is-
tagging in, he'll take.
All right. I think the section of restrictions that appear in section 404 is intended to still continue to apply, and I think there's some doubt that they do continue to apply. I think that's the clarity of the whole, of that issue. This looks like a murky field because what you're seeing is multiple tenants angry with the landlord. And how, going down this rabbit hole will be hard if you're trying to solve tenant-landlord relationships simultaneously. On the other hand, the wisdom of this group is beyond doubt, and maybe you can get there from here, but gosh, that looks awfully complex to me. Here's what they're saying. The public market didn't work, and we tried it for 5 years, and we give you back the money that we got. Now, that's what I'd say.
Well, I
Tim,
think
if
that's, I would
misjudged-
just add one other thing, and that is that you were read a section from the settlement agreement. You were read the first two sentences of that section, and there's a last sentence of that section, and it reads that this agreement is not intended and shall not affect any obligations or restrictions of the company, that being TDP Phase 1, set forth in the redevelopment agreement except with respect to the public market. That's the language that's being relied upon with respect to the fact that the use restrictions would remain in place. I don't think that was read in the earlier presentations. I just wanted the council to be aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Camp.
To both of you gentlemen, hearing what Mr. Gallion, I think was his name, that spoke and talked about those $71 square foot rents in the public market area, and you look at what current market rates are, even assuming it's a small 500 square foot area, bump it up 50% to $22 or something. Does that sound like good faith to you when they're charging $71 a square foot?
I'm not sure that I'm going to place a great deal of faith in a piece of information with just this basis. I might say that in the abstract, I would say that, although you might also say there are areas available to customers that aren't accounted in the square footage, and I think that adds a sophistication to it. But I gotta tell you, I'm not sure where your evidence comes from and who's making it, and I'm not gonna, you may wanna go down that path for which you get my eternal respect, but I'm uncomfortable with the body of evidence that you have and the claims that you've received so far on that score. So I don't wanna go there.
Well, and that's why I did ask Mr. Willis, who represents them, to get the data for us, so we know what the facts are. But I think Mr. Gallion said one of his partners in Gate 25 also was the donut hole, so they had firsthand experience. But, okay, I'm trying to look more at this in the good faith effort to make this public market work, and some of this raises concern that, was that ever done, or was it more, well, anyway.
Perhaps you were right to begin with when you abstained from signing and voting for this redevelopment agreement years ago. Perhaps you were prescient in some way that day, John.
Councilwoman Gaylor-Bair.
Before we leave this item, I'd love for the city attorney's office to clarify what question, what issue is before the council, given that so many have been raised, some of which we understand are landlord-tenant issues. What questions specifically are we being asked to answer? And I'm thinking, for instance, is good faith effort something we are to be evaluating as part of this? Because that has come up again and again.
The question before this council is the approval of this settlement agreement that's been presented to you. That's the question before this council. If there's a question with respect to good faith efforts or something along those lines that you would like to be investigated further, I suppose that's something that is something we can do. It would involve other matters, perhaps some form of litigation or something along those lines. If council were to direct us to look into whether or not good faith efforts were made, and I suppose that's the ultimate outcome. If there were not good faith efforts found, then we would have to determine what the proper remedy is for something like that. And so we can approve this, or if it's not approved, then I think that we stay with the status quo. And if you would like us to look into the good faith effort, we can do that, and then there's a follow-up for what comes thereafter.
I'm asking you as our attorney whether or not that is something that we are expected to take into account in order to make this decision.
I think it's something you're asked to take into account, yes. Can I give you a definitive answer as to whether it's good faith efforts were made? I don't have all those facts in front of me. But is it something you should consider? Certainly. I don't sense that I'm answering your question.
I'm trying to understand, based on all the issues raised, which ones are before the council and which ones are before tenants and landlords in the private sector.
The issue before this council is there's a settlement agreement out there which says if it's entered into, the developer pays back $266,000, which goes then towards payment of the bond. And the restrictions with respect to the public market go away, and the other use restrictions remain in place. And again, we point to the last sentence of this section that talks about the agreement. This agreement is not intended and shall not affect any obligations or restrictions of the company in the redevelopment agreement except with respect to the public market. That's, as our interpretation of it is that the developer's attorney has made that representation to this council today. So anything beyond that, anything beyond this settlement agreement is, I guess, beyond the scope of what we're considering.
And is there any further language you would add to that paragraph to make that crystal clear for people who doubt the veracity of that statement?
We certain correctness of it. I don't know about veracity of it, but we can add language if that would make everyone clear. I don't get the sense that that language will clear up what's before us today, but we can certainly add a sentence or make it much more crystal clear that the use restrictions in the redevelopment agreement remain in effect for this project, if that would clear up the issue. But again, based on what I've heard today, I don't think that gets us there. But that's my reading of it.
Councilwoman Raybold and then Councilwoman Lamb.
Well, that's exactly the point I was hoping that you would come to, and Lyrian got you there to talk about language that may clarify or make it stronger so that the tenants' concerns about the interpretation are crystal clear.
Councilwoman Lamb.
Yeah, so I just want to talk just for a minute about the good faith portion. So as I understand it, under the settlement agreement, obviously we're getting back the $400,000 because they haven't been able to do what they needed to do under the original redevelopment agreement. But by the same token, in this part of this agreement, we as a city are giving up some of our rights under this settlement as far as what we expect for use of that space, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so that would be where the good faith would come in. Have they in good faith acted to meet our requirements in order for us to give up our rights?
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. And thank you, council members, for helping me catch that. So we'll go back to Mr. Landis.
Thank you. Yes.
Items, yeah.
By the way, I haven't had this much fun since
Golf?
defending my master's thesis in front of a series of full professors who grilled me all day long. That was the day I went to the bars when it was all over. This is the 5-year strategic plan that we offer HUD for our plans for what we're going to do with federal money. And we do housing, we do homeless care, we do CDBG. In the creation of these two documents, which we did not prepare for each of you individually.
Thank you.
Had we prepared it with the paper made from ash trees, I think we would have gotten a darn good start on the ash borer problem in Lincoln when you think of that as the report sending off. We said an executive summary. The summary talks about what we're telling HUD we will do in this coming year and 4 more years, although those can be changed on a yearly basis. To do this, we had 23 meetings with the public. We had about 200 people come at different of those meetings, and we met them at different times and settings and talked about what was in the plan. The plan basically keeps us doing what we're doing now. It does consolidate some of the existing pieces that we had separately, like the $25,000 for the low-income moderate area park and the $100,000 for the focus area, into the larger $125,000 for livable neighborhoods. It's a change of title. It has a certain flexibility. The number hasn't changed. This continues the common practice that we're now making, which is to invest a great deal of this money in making affordable housing more long-lasting. However, there is something in doing this project which reveals to us, we had suspicioned it before, but it's clearer. One of the things this report tells us is how much, if we choose 50% of median income and below as our standard, how many housing units are necessary to meet the needs that's out there. That number is 5,600 to the best of our ability to do that. We now know and can document the problem we have suspicioned it is there and that we've heard is there. And this document helps us. The second thing this document does is it does say, look, affordable housing is bubbling to the future. It's in Lincoln, it's in Omaha, it's in every major city of the country. Affordable housing is where the haves and the have-nots really separate, because the have-nots have a hard time finding safe, livable, quality housing. In fact, the solution is to live together in multiple settings and in the housing that is at the absolute margin of what the law would do with respect to quality. So what this then says, it says, look, here's some things that we want to do in the coming year. One of the things we want to do is we want to develop an idea that people could look at. Not promising, but looking at it. It's inclusionary zoning. We want to look at a policy that said TIF agreements need to have a share of the housing to be for affordable housing. To see what the policy would look like, not to agree to it, that's for the council to do, the administration, but to develop those policy options. What's missing from this, I think, is some kind of overarching community conversation, because it's not in here. We don't promise a community conversation. We don't promise a conversation between the development community, the philanthropic community, the public sector and the operators of, and the renters who are in need of affordable housing. Those four parties need to sit in the same room and talk about what we're going to do in affordable housing. It's the best. I think that's a piece that's coming. This is helpful on that score, but it doesn't solve that problem, and I think that's what's remaining out there to be done. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the strategic plan.
Are there questions? Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. Thank you very much for putting this together and honoring the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1984. Because we don't have the larger document, I'm just wanting to clarify some things because you had mentioned a couple of things. Is there anything in the document once we submit it that actually commits us to the policies that you just discussed?
No. Okay. We are bound by federal law, but it doesn't promise that we're going to change policy. It's not promising what the council will approve. It doesn't say and doesn't commit to changing zoning rules or requiring incentives. What it does say is we recipients of federal funds as an agency will help identify ideas and stop at that.
Okay, and in exchange for the funds that we're looking to receive as a result of this, does this trigger any requirement on the part of the city to, for instance, we saw the turnback tax, some portion of that coming back in the budget. Does this commit us to that?
No, turnback tax is a different source, not covered by this document. It's not federal money. Okay. It's in fact state money out of the operations in the proximity of the arena distributed by a state law. Okay. So it doesn't require that. Yeah. Now, we do make reference to this as an idea, because we get to have ideas, and we say that idea, but it doesn't commit us to anything.
Okay, and so that's what, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know that I'm a proponent of affordable housing. And I want to make sure that that's going to happen, but at the same time, I want to make sure that there's no obligation for funding coming out of this particular document.
We do not make promises of funding other than to describe what we expect to do, and you'll find this, by the way, generally in your budget, and you'll find it in page 7 of the summary, the list of those things. And if you were to compare it to last year, you're going to see an almost identical quality, other than we have a slight uptick in some of our federal funds, and we've allocated those. Okay. This is like what we've done in the past with a couple of different labels, but for the same purposes. What we do is we spend money to make affordable housing last longer for homeowners. What we don't do with our federal money is find a way to create the subsidy necessary to create affordable housing for renters. And they remain, I think, a significant problem in the community.
Thank you.
Councilman Eskridge.
Thank you, Mr. Landis. You anticipated where I wanted to go, because home ownership is increasingly getting, it's one of those things that you're reaching for it, but it's getting farther off. You just don't seem to be able to get there for many people. So rentership is the best option for many people. And these programs are they geared toward home ownership, or is rental assistance?
And by the way, we could do that. We could do that. The federal law only says it's got to be for a low and moderate income person. It's got to be consistent with federal objectives. But we could take these resources and do that. At one time we did, and we had a very checkered career. You know who pays us back? Poor people. You know who don't pay us back, given the economic development loans that we made with some of these monies years ago? Doctors. We had any number of failed economic development projects by people who walked on us because their shell corporation went bankrupt, and they were very wealthy people. One of the things that happened, by the way, was that we also rented to some rental projects. They had a less satisfactory rate of return. Our rate of return for lending for people at 80% of the moderate income who want to be in a house is incredibly high. And because it is, it means the dollar comes back to us, and we can lend it again. And that's one of the reasons we do it. We also think that home ownership is positive for neighborhood stability. The problem is that home ownership is not within the reach of many people. So if you put all your eggs in that basket, there is a naked basket over here. Now, the Lincoln Housing Authority is charged with helping on that score, right? It's up to us as to what we do on that score. I will tell you this, there isn't a major city in America that you would not hear people saying there is a problem with affordable housing. And it comes from income disparity more than anything else.
And we will be having some further conversations on these topics.
We should.
Yeah.
We should, because this problem's there, and there is nothing in the trends that says it will get better on its own. The trends say, I think it will get worse.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Landis? Anyone else here to speak on this item?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is W. Cecil Stewart. I'm founder and president of the Joslin Institute for Sustainable Communities. I did not come here today necessarily to speak on this topic, but it is a critical and vital topic for this community, and it's a critical and vital topic for every community that intends and wants to be sustainable. Our experience across the country is that there is no city that has a handle on and provides an inventory sufficient for affordable residents, and some people call this workforce housing, and every community has that problem. And the only communities that have answers are those that take the time to plan specifically for affordable and workforce housing. I'm very encouraged by what I hear Mr. Landis describe to you and the CDBG planning that's going on, and I simply wanted to reinforce from our professional point of view that it's exactly on target and exactly needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this testifier? Thank you. Next testifier.
Yeah, hello. I'm Chelsea Yegenberger. I live at 1716 B Street, and I'm a part of a group called Renters Together, and we are a renters' rights and affordable housing advocacy group. And we've been meeting over the past year and a half to just try to educate ourselves about what our community does have going for us as far as community programs and getting an understanding of what the resources we do have are. I really want to thank Mr. Landis and Urban Development for the comments shared today, as well as what is in the strategic plan. I think they've hit a number of issues that our group has seen. However, what we know is that the action plan projects do not reflect looking at providing affordable housing for renters and ensuring that that is a priority. So we want to continue to stress that. We know that it is a complex issue, and a lot of the policy recommendations that were mentioned by Mr. Landis, I think are things that we would be in support of, and we know that we need to have more conversations about those, but we would really like to see those efforts continue. But in addition to that, I think this is a multifaceted approach, and I agree with what he said as far as we need to have more ongoing conversations. And that's why I think we need an affordable housing coalition. We've seen the Homeless Coalition do wonderful things in addressing the homeless population here in Lincoln, and I think the same thing is going to be needed to address this so that we can all be at the table and find ways to address not only new developments, but also existing housing stock and ensuring that those are maintaining affordable, but are also quality. So I would just encourage you guys to continue to look at those efforts. I would think that a coalition can be built and make amendments to this plan in the future, and that those amendments could be policy changes, and I would think that that continued conversation will be beneficial for us being a leader in addressing this national issue. And I also would welcome you to come to our Renters Together meeting. We are meeting this Thursday, July 12th at 7:30 p.m. at the Commons. And you can always reach out to us at renterstogetherlnk@gmail.com. In addition to that, we meet the first first Thursday of every month. So I hope to see you and speak with you again about these issues.
Thank you. Are there questions for this testifier?
I have a question.
Yes, Councilwoman Lamb.
Yeah, so I just wondered if your organization is part of the My LNK. Are you guys on that app at all?
No, we're not. I'm not sure the best way to get on that app. We've been pretty informal, but I believe maybe Prosper Lincoln is behind that, so we could certainly reach out to Brian Seck and have those conversations, and he has been to our meetings anyway, so he's aware of us.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for this testifier? Anyone else in the audience like to speak to this resolution?
Hi everyone, my name is Isabel. I live at 665 Sumner Street. I am a renter. And I'm also working with the South of Downtown CDO, and we have been coordinating efforts with Renters Together, which is a very valuable resource and very necessary as we continue to have these conversations about providing affordable housing. I guess the first thing that I want to ask for is a distinction. The strategic plan has a lot of funds allocated for homeownership and homelessness, and there's nothing in the middle. And that's really what is concerning to us, because our focus area at the south of downtown is 94% rental. So 94% of those units in our area are rental units. And that's a huge population there's a big need for better conditions for housing, better housing opportunities, better funding for people who just can't make ends meet. So I would, I guess, ask for the distinction to be made between affordable homeownership and affordable rental housing, because right now those two ideas are very much stuck together, and they need to be separated, because one is being met very well, and then the other one is just completely lost within the plan. Besides that, I don't have anything else to add to anything.
Questions for this testifier? Seeing none, thank you.
Hi, my name is Grant Daly, and I'm also going to be talking as a member of Renters Together. One of the things I just wanted to stress was what David Landis mentioned when he was speaking to you about the need for, or the exploration of policy options that the city could benefit from. There's Midwest cities that are starting to really face the kind of challenges that some of the coastal cities have faced with affordable housing issues now. And what the research has shown from what I guess all the articles I've been reading is that the time to act is sooner rather than later. When you're in the midst of a housing crisis that's out of control, it gets really hard. You have a delay from when the policy is enacted to when it actually starts making an impact. So I would just stress that the sooner the better that we can move forward with a conversation about what type of policy options, whether it be inclusionary zoning, whether it be tools to make community land bank policies or other shared equity cooperatives. There's lots of little policies that kind of underlie those organizations that need to be explored as well. So I think that conversation, having that conversation about what those policy tools are is really important. And I think it could take the form of an affordable policy charrette, where members of the city and local stakeholders would be engaged in kind of a conversation to move forward with what kind of policies the city wants to explore. I also just want to stress too that the data review, I don't know if you've had time to kind of go over it in the strategic plan, but there's been differences, those trends that he's pointing to of the crisis getting worse. I found some numbers here. In 2012, there are 81 affordable and available units per every 100 renter households. The most current report finds that we only have 75 available for every 100 renter households. So that's getting tighter. The vacancy rates for rental units have gone from 7.7% in 2010 to 6.5% now. So what we're seeing and what the report shows is that there's just this tightening in the housing market generally, both for rentership and for home ownership. And what that's doing is it's squeezing those low-income renters out of the units that they would be normally occupying. So I just want to stress that we're seeing the impacts now, and we should really move forward to considering those policies before they get to a point that they're out of control. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there questions for this testifier? Thank you. Is anyone else who would like to speak with this?
My name is Jill Rogers. I live at 1201 East Street, apartment 3. I suppose I should preface this, whatever comes out of my mouth, with the fact that although it may be politically incorrect to talk about the politics, it's important to talk about the politics because that affects individuals. Earlier we were discussing allocations of TIF funds, talking about the natural growth of values going to public benefit. But if we look at a plan and we see that there is no allocation of funds for a renter, then are we not public? Are we not part of that public benefit pool? When we talk about the answer to some of our woes being the public and private partnership, if the public partnership is really the city and those who make decisions in the institutions, and then a private market, where am I in the public setting? Who am I as a renter? You know, if we allocate funds toward, you know, the streetscapes and the new markets and this and that and whatever, but we have, you know, porches falling in and homes falling in, and it becomes outrageous to spend $200,000 to just do basic things in a neighborhood, but it's not so outrageous to spend $2 million on a new project in West O or Haymarket or Rail Yard or wherever you want to put it. I think it's you have to look at the politics of that. If we talk about providing affordability, we know very well that 5 years from now, what was this now is not this then. The land value that I live on, or the value of the land that I live on, has doubled since last year. So when we talk about affordability and we say, oh, well, it can wait till next plan, or it can wait till this and that, it really can't, because the change is already happening. The value is already increasing. And to be real with you, the public benefit is not allocated to me or people like me. And that's an issue. That's an issue that keeps getting ignored if we keep pushing things back, because the further you push things back, the more values rise. If we're going to talk about sustained affordability, we have to then talk about costs of living. We have to talk about what the value of a property does to property taxes, how that affects the landlord when they're talking about what they're going to allocate as a rent for their tenant. There is much more than just saying, oh, well, we made a unit that has something affordable right now. What does that look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now? What does the land ownership look like? What does the property ownership look like? That is what really allocates, or what really affects affordability for an individual like me who does not own land or own property. That affects me based on somebody else's decision, in which a lot of the times the vocabulary still does not include an individual like myself. So I think if we have to talk in terms of recommendations, I would like the recommendation to be that this demographic of ignored individuals be put into the equation, and not just involved in the conversations, but involved in the ownership. And because we can make decisions all day, you can ask me all day what I want to see, but if I can't afford it, what does it matter what I said? Anybody can make those recommendations. It's different if I can't live in it. I'm designing something for somebody else, and that's not right. That's all I got.
Thank you. Are there questions for this testifier? Again, thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Thank you. Teresa, can we go to our last item in resolutions?
Yes, our last item is a resolution directing the mayor to solicit proposals to purchase Pershing Auditorium.
Yes.
I think I should probably speak on this because I asked that this be put forward. essentially, we've got the Pershing Municipal Auditorium that's been sitting vacant for about 5 years. And there is a listing on our website that it's for sale, but what I'm looking for is, because the ongoing costs, and we've seen in our recent budget discussions, we're looking at $100,000 plus a year just to have it sit there. And so my motion specifically directs the mayor to prepare and issue a request for proposals so we can proactively get that out there rather than just passively have it on a website. So that's basically it, to get it out there and see what we can do to get it possibly back on the tax rolls and save those costs for the taxpayers.
So first testifier, is anyone else here to testify on this item? Yes. I think I handled that
Just to
badly.
clarify, is you asking for proponents or opponents or in general?
I think I'm asking for proponents at this point.
Okay.
No, wait, hang on. I want you guys to stay here and talk.
Okay.
I'd like to know, what are we currently doing to market this property?
Sure. We are and have been on the World Wide Web with an IFRP that we followed up on when we did an RFP process, and for which, whenever I get a chance to, I talk about it in public and all the settings that I know of developers. We've done business maybe with 60 different settings. Every chance I get, the developers that come through the door, I remind that this exists. When I go to a LIBA meeting, I stand up and remind them that they know that they want to sell this. I ask them if they want to buy it because I'm ready to sell it to them. So is the city. Anyway, we have an IFRP out that's open. It doesn't tell the market what it needs to do and as to like what we want on the land. It says, if you've got a money-making idea that you want to come and talk to us about, we're open. And has been. And but for a recent conversation with a developer, occasioned by the fact that the state wants more office use in the downtown area because of the changes in the state capital, the contemplation is run to, is Pershing, something that could be considered? The answer is sure it could be. We have an IFRP. We have, if you have a money-making idea, we've said for these years, come in and talk to us. An IFRP is faster and cheaper than the suggestion that's been made in this redevelopment. An RFP takes longer and it costs more. On the other hand, if there was something to be done in answer to your question, it would be to formally undertake, for example, reaching out to the previous developers that we've had in the city, anybody that we know in the development community, and remind them as to where the IFRP is and what its terms are and how they would comply. I'm going to guess that if there is action on Pershing, it'll come from somebody in the development community more than anybody else, if it was to move to a private sector use. And that's something that we could do from where we are now. But that's the status of where things stand. We've had an IFRP process. It didn't prove to be successful. We do have an open IFRP so that if somebody in this group wanted to walk through and set up a meeting tomorrow and talk about their plans for Pershing, we'd entertain that conversation.
And I think I would add to that, what are we doing right now? So there is an ongoing downtown master plan process that will be completed by the end of the calendar year. So within that, there are a lot of different parts to that type of an effort, but we have had a lot of discussion about the Pershing site. It is a very top target of possible ideas that come out of that plan. That doesn't surprise me, and it probably doesn't surprise most people in the room right now, but what is being really contemplated there is basically a plan that's going to give some direction on what to do with Pershing. That process is not done yet. I can say, though, that we've had over 1,700 responses to our survey that we have as part of that, which is a great response. We're very pleased by that. What's rising to the top is what are we doing about Pershing, as well as some ideas for Pershing, including private investment as well as public investment, including a library. That's a very high item of interest. And so my expectation is that that plan will elevate Pershing to a very, very high level of point of action going forward, coming out of that study, up to and including both public and private use there.
Thank you. Councilman Camp had some, Councilman Raybould, you were questioning.
Well, I had just a follow-up. So
Yes.
what's private sector telling you that the impediments to develop this property?
I think Mr. Landis can speak to that as well, but I think what we continue to hear is that there is an existing structure on there that, for some ideas, is an impediment for what could be done there. I think in general, I think there is interest, and I think that's what David was alluding to, but it has not gelled yet for what I think would be in the best interest of the city. But we're hoping part of what a plan can do for like an updated downtown master plan is kind of get some more juice into the conversation to put it out there again. So I mean, that's part of what's going on right now.
I can tell you what I've heard, conversations, when I've asked people, how come you all say you want to do this, how come you don't step forward? And the answer is twofold. One, the existing building doesn't make full use of the footprint of the block. So it's not a particularly good use of the space, given what the opportunity is there. And to get rid of the building is someplace between $1 to $2 million. So you buy it from the city, then you spend $2 million to get rid of it, so you can get down to land which can only be built to 57 feet in height. You need a rate of return that can justify that. You need a lot of square footage. You could spend $2 million to get rid of a building if you could build an 8-story building, because you'd have so much square footage you could rent and sell and condos. But because it's in the capital environs, it can only go up to the foot of the state capitol, which is 57 feet. It means stretching at its 4 floors. That's a good-sized building, and it's an entire block, but it is, because of the impediment of the demolition, tied with the limited opportunity for development to take its place. The equation is hard to make work in that sense. And the secondary question is parking. Now, there is subterranean parking, and you could expand that, and that would be very, very helpful. But building parking below grade is about 50% more expensive than building above grade. So that's a problem. Unlocking that all has been difficult, but when we've had serious conversations, and we have, and by the way, never with somebody who said, look, I'm ready to do this, will you sign? They've always walked away before that happened. But one of the things they said was, if we put this block with others, at least more land in the area, we could get a footprint that would be large enough to make money. The impediments there were finding willing sellers. And this council is, I think, anathema, much of city council, is to using eminent domain for private sector economic development. It's hard enough to do it for a public purpose in this town. But even though the law would allow us to condemn private property so that we could turn around and then sell it to another private developer, the chance of that happening in this town, I think, are very low. Thank you. I won't even search for the metaphor that says a number that low. I can't imagine what it is. Anyway, those are impediments that we hear.
Councilman Kim, I'm going to let Councilman Lamb go since you opened and come back to you.
My question was about the last RFP. When was the last RFP done on Pershing? Was it 2012 or 2014?
Something like that. If you give me a chance, I'll do some research for it. We sent out to the world, who wants to come step forward. It actually was sort of the use of an IFRP at that time, but we had 3 proposals.
Okay, so we did get proposals.
We did get proposals. One of them was for student housing with a swimming pool overlooking Centennial Mall. And the other 2 were, if you will promise to pay us rent for the next 30 years, we'll build the building, we won't go to the public, they won't get a chance to vote for it, and then after 30 years of paying us rent, we'll give the building to you for $1. Which is okay, except that the rent comes out of the general fund. And to have a couple of $1 million a year out of the general fund that you can't play with, is hard. It's hard, for, I think, for the executive branch and the legislative branch to build in entitlements, because you just can't show flexibility on entitlements. And it was a major entitlement. So that wasn't a very attractive element. It was, they didn't have the money to do it themselves. They wanted us to be their tenant for 30 years. And they wouldn't do business with anybody else, and they wouldn't bring us somebody else to do business with if the city would be the tenant. They'd do business with us. That wasn't very attractive.
But I guess my point was we did get responses
We
to the
did.
RFP. Thank
We
you.
did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Camp.
Well, follow up on that part, when the RFP went out, it was my understanding that it was the mayor who said no to the student housing that Speedway Motors had proposed. Otherwise, it would have happened, but the mayor decided that, in his opinion, that wasn't the appropriate use of the land.
I think that's
So
accurate.
So the city was the one who denied it. We could have had the use of it, and it would have all been done. And so from that standpoint, I don't know that you can say the RFP wasn't successful. It's just the mayor didn't agree. So the second thing is, I don't know if you have any other further comment, but I mean, that's factual. So
There was a thing. I think you're allowed, I'm not going to contradict that perception, and I do think it's true. They stepped forward with financing more certain than the other two, and it weren't based on that same thing. By the way, they wanted us to demolish the land and then give them the land, basically, as I recall. In other words, the city lost money on the Speedway deal. We didn't sell it. We gave it away and paid a premium to do so. But that's the flip side of the coin.
I think, well, no matter what happens to that, to even give it away for and spend $2 million is
I
a small price
understand
to
that.
pay. I'm sorry. It just,
It'll be an interesting day when we go to the public and say, let's give away property for free.
Well, we essentially
It'd be
do
a
that
hard
down
time.
in the West Haymarket now. We say we'll charge you $15 a square foot for the land that we've already remediated and spent tens of millions of dollars to do, and then we'll give you TIF to pay us back the $15. So we're not only giving it away, we're remediating. So it's the same principle.
I don't see it. John, I'm sorry. I don't mean to
That
get
isn't
into an
the
argument.
purpose
You made
today.
your point.
The
Fair
purpose
enough.
today is let's get out there and do it. Now, you said you've advertised on the World Wide Web, www. So
We're on the internet.
www.what? Would it be like
I'm sorry,
Lincoln
it's on the Urban Development webpage.
website?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm looking for a proactive, direct push on this, and that's the purpose of my resolution.
Thank you.
Councilman Eskridge.
Yeah,
And by the way, can I just say, we're not in dispute on that issue.
Okay.
We think ultimately a good civic use of that land as soon as we can get to it is a good idea. And there I don't think we have much dispute.
Councilman Eskridge.
Thank you. I served on that committee, and it has been 6 probably years ago, and it was, I don't recall the exact vote or even if we ever took a vote. I think there was a lot of disagreement, that nobody, there was no unanimity on the housing proposal. There were many that just felt that was not what that space really called for. And I'm not sure that ever was actually given to the mayor for approval. He certainly could have taken it, but
In
that's
fact,
water under the
the
bridge.
result was that there wasn't a recommendation from the group.
Okay.
That was the distribution. I overstated the things, I think, from John's perspective. I think you probably have that. I need to go back to say, the city could have overruled that committee action and taken an affirmative step. I think that might be the case that we could agree to. But there wasn't a recommendation to sell that was reversed.
Other questions of staff testimony? You like to add anything, Mr. Carey, Mr. Landis?
I just say, if you charged my department to do something to make the availability and the use of the IFRP and what the facts and figures of the building are, and take that message to the development community in some form, whether it's written or letters or emails or whatever. If you give us that instruction, we would do that.
And I think my only other point to make there is that I think the other reality of the current situation is if there is something were to come forward now because the IFRP is standing open, if it was we can't ignore type of proposal, that is something that urban development has been willing and able to accept those and have those discussions. But currently, because there is some action on the downtown housing of the state employees, there's an RFP out to find new location for that. That is possibly something that could jiggle something loose and come forward. That would be a very good idea, and I think we are open to doing that. So I'm just making sure that everybody's aware that that has been the case and will continue to be the case. That if a really good proposal comes forward, that is our duty at this point to hear those.
Councilman Eskridge.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I have a substitute that I would like to propose. I don't know if this is the time for it or
I just a question before we went further.
I'm sorry.
So you said you want to do whatever, and at the end you said whatever to get this moving forward. Would whatever include a commercial realtor? Someone who actually go out and beat the bushes and try to actively look for somebody rather than passively post it up on the World Wide Web?
I'd need a moment to reflect on that. I think it's a cost that we might have there, but let me not say I object to the idea, but let me not say that I endorse it on myself either. I'm a lieutenant. Here's what I can speak for. I can speak for my department and what our resources can do, and I would be happy to help with my people and our resources to do the function that John wants done. That's different than me making a decision as to what commercial relationship we have with somebody else. That question, I think, could be asked, but asked of another.
I'm sorry, Councilman Christensen.
I was going to mention that Carl is talking about a substitute resolution.
Yes.
Is now the time to do that, or?
That was going to be my procedural question. Should we take additional testimony from?
We haven't closed the public hearing, so
Maybe
perhaps
Carl's
in voting.
proposal
We haven't
would
closed.
color the testimony or comments people might want to make.
Okay.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, would you help with that?
Yes, Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. As the city clerk pointed out, public hearing on this original resolution is still open. It is contrary to our usual procedure to allow amendments while the public hearing is still going on.
Yes.
What may be the most efficient use of this council's time would be for Councilman Eskridge to explain to the public what his amendment is, and then as the public hearing continues, the public who doesn't know the language of his amendment would have an opportunity to address either the original resolution or his proposed amendment.
Is that agreeable to the council? He'll do a brief explanation of his amendment, and then we'll continue with public.
Sure. Okay. And I want to preface it by saying, I think John and I share a lot of the same thoughts, that Pershing sat empty for too long, and we want to see good and productive use of that property. It's important to our community. The 1, 2, 3, 4th, whereas, in John's version, it says, whereas it is in the best interest of the city to sell Pershing Auditorium and to put that property on the tax rolls. My substitute would say, whereas it is in the best interest of the city to continue to seek the highest and best use of this property. That's the essential difference. It could be a public use, it could be a private use. We need to see what the best offers, the best proposals are for us, as was done previously. And as has been mentioned, there are groups working on this. So this would then go to the mayor to reissue the open IFRP for the Pershing block, to reach out to developers for potential proposals to reuse this property and to put the asset back to work for our community.
Councilman
I
Camp?
think one of the elements in there, Mr. Eskridge shared with me before our meeting was his says the mayor is requested to reissue, and mine said the mayor is directed. And I guess putting my legal mind on, requested is more, gives the mayor the discretion to do it. I used the word directed, because I'd like this body to say, yes, do this, that we want an affirmative action. And so I prefer, the word directed was purposely put there. So that, and I don't know, maybe you meant the same thing, it's just you used the word requested.
No, requested was what I
you're-
meant, but, yeah,
So you were just gonna ask the mayor, but it's up to him whether he did it?
it's expected.
Is expected, well, would you mind, well, I mean, the directed to me, and then I think the other parts sound fine, but I wanna see something done. I don't wanna see the inaction.
Having heard the explanation and some discussion, I'd like to go back to the public testimony. Is there anyone else here to testify on this item?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Herb Friedman, 3800 Normal Boulevard. I'm the president of the Lincoln Library Board of Trustees. We're an administrative board charged with the responsibility of managing the library system and the facilities. We are appointed by this council. There are 7 board members, each serving 7-year terms, rotating once a year. Bennett Martin Public Library, built in 1962, was a philanthropic gift from the former mayor, Bennett Martin. It replaced the old Carnegie Library, also a philanthropic gift that was built in 1903. Old Main, as it was referred to, had a 60-year run. It is one of the oldest public buildings in the city. When I say it, meaning Bennett Martin, is one of the oldest public buildings in the city, still being used, and it turns 56 this fall. Our board is charged with overlooking and selecting facilities for Lincoln libraries. Starting at the beginning of the current century, we began to focus on Bennett Martin, well past its prime, studying the necessity to either remodel or replace the building and possible locations. The board has appointed a central library committee consisting of members of the board, the foundation, and the public to examine all the issues and all the facts and report to the board. We commissioned 3 studies to help us assess the situation and consulted numerous professionals. The board has unanimously concluded that the 1962 Bennett Martin Library no longer meets the needs of this 21st century city. It was built when the city was approximately half its current size, in an era of electric typewriters and dial telephones. Computers and cell phones were not yet heard of, not even in science fiction. We have previously recommended to the city on multiple occasions that a new library be built on Block 63, also known as the Pershing Block. That recommendation was rejected. I'm here today asking that you reconsider the matter. The RFP, by the way, was done in 2011, 7 years ago when I first came on the board, and I'm about to go off the board. This block has been used, this block meaning Block 63, has been used extensively for public service since the city was platted in 1867 as the capital of Nebraska. It was the first home of Lincoln High School and has never been on the tax rolls. It is well situated on Centennial Mall, anchoring the east part of downtown and close to the new Telegraph District, with easy access for pedestrians. The downtown library service area includes about 60,000 people and is the largest in the city. Pershing can accommodate on-site parking, something not available on Bennett Martin. All of the professionals who advise us on this matter have recommended Pershing as the most logical location for a new library, and it is already owned by the city. While the professionals all prefer a full block, we have come to believe that a half block could suit the needs of Lincoln. Pershing could be shared with another public or private partner. We have been and remain willing to explore such a partnership. In fact, over the past several years, we have reached out and discussed such partnerships with various entities. The downtown master plan, which was just discussed, is close to being finalized and released. It is our understanding that the plan will consider a new library. We believe that attempting to sell Pershing before the master plan is updated would be a mistake. We have been working on this project for about 18 years, and delaying the matter for a few more months should not be a problem. Accordingly, the board recommends that the decisions regarding the future of the regarding the future Bennett Mart of Pershing Block be continued until the master plan is released, as that will enable the council to consider all of the information contained in the master plan with regard to the future use of Pershing. There have been suggestions about placing Pershing on the tax rolls. If the Pershing block is used in part for a new library, the other half of that block, plus the quarter block now occupied by Bennett Martin, could be sold and placed on the tax rolls. These are exciting times for our city. It is growing and continues to be one of the finest places in the nation to live. We are significantly behind just plain out of step when it comes to providing our community with 21st century central library services. All over the country, cities of all sizes are investing in new libraries. We hope Lincoln can be one of those cities in the immediate future. Libraries are part of our system of public education, and public education is the lifeblood of our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this testifier? Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman, I know that you're going to be leaving your position on the board soon, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your years of service with the library board, and just know that this council and members of this community appreciate your service very much.
Thanks, ma'am.
Questions?
Before I leave, I do have some documents. Anthony Goings, who some of you probably know, was scheduled to appear today, but Anthony is not able to do so. He's given us his comments, and I asked to give this to the city clerk.
If there's others who wish to testify, please come forward.
And I also have a copy of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kit Keller, and I am a Lincoln resident. I live at 1934 Twin Ridge Road. I'm also a longtime member of the American Library Association. I've worked as a professional librarian at the Nebraska Library Commission in public and academic libraries, and I am a past president of the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association. I'm here to support the use of the Pershing site for a downtown library, which is a long overdue need in Lincoln for an updated central library. The existing Bennett Martin building limits the needed growth and expansion of the high-quality services and collection development that the library offers. That being said, the next consideration is the critical question of the location of an up-to-date public library facility. The Pershing site is an optimal choice. There is a large body of credible research that supports the value of a centrally located city library. You need look no further than Urban Libraries Council for supporting data about the positive impact of this type of central location. Highlights of some of the research include the role of city libraries as important partners in sustainability. Central city or urban libraries are major players in creating livable, environmentally friendly cities and towns. As stated in one such report from Urban Libraries Council, as local governments continue to explore what it means to be a digital connected community, public libraries can quickly adapt to new technologies, be vigilant about bridging digital divides, explore new ways to leverage technology, and to meet community needs. Libraries are already providing programs and services that support community priorities and improve the quality of life for all residents. The need to fulfill that role is expanding as Lincoln continues to grow both in population and in diversity. Further research demonstrates that central libraries attract large numbers of people, creating economic opportunities for a myriad of businesses and organizations in the surrounding area. Research also supports the role of public libraries as business development hubs. Public libraries are uniquely equipped to support entrepreneurship as a driver of local economic health and ensure equal access to the foundations of entrepreneurial success. With their deep community connections, libraries can become essential resource navigators to connect potential entrepreneurs to knowledge, tools, partners, and ideas to advance their economic growth. An innovative public library has the power to revitalize downtown Lincoln. Additional research shows that library buildings as architectural structures are culturally relevant and can be a draw for tourists who are visiting the city for other reasons. Vibrant downtown libraries help revitalize struggling or depressed neighborhoods and downtowns. And in addition, to research shows that the physical space of the library communicates to the public our underlying values that libraries, information, and shared community space matter. As a lifelong librarian, I have a personal reason for supporting this proposal. A basic tenet of the librarian profession is equal access to information. As noted by the American Library Association, libraries help ensure that Americans can access the information they need, regardless of age, education, ethnicity, language, income, physical limitations, or geographic barriers. Equality of access to accurate, unbiased information is a building block of a strong democracy, and a new downtown library and the Pershing site would meet this need and allow Lincoln City Libraries to continue to meet the growing information needs of the entire community. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this testifier? Thank you, Ms. Keller. Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Sothen, 2835 Bonnicum Drive. I am a current member of the Foundation for Lincoln City Libraries Board of Trustees. I'm its immediate past president and continuing as its current advisor. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, for this opportunity to speak. I especially want to thank you, Mr. Camp, for bringing renewed focus and attention to the Pershing block, and doing so with a sense of urgency to find a satisfactory answer quickly to the challenging question of what should be done with the block in keeping with the best interests of the city. Now, you've just heard, or recently heard, from Library Board of Trustees President Herb Friedman. My comments will echo in large part those he made, with some added differences. But to be clear, the Foundation is keenly interested in supporting the board's vision and the library's objective to build a 21st century library here in downtown Lincoln. The Foundation has commissioned not one but two large independent studies over the past decade and a half, supplemented by additional smaller studies and research to address the size, the location, the programming, and costs associated with a new downtown library. And though the recommendations received over time have all consistently identified the Pershing block as the preferred site for the new library, our focus as the Foundation is more than a new library be built, less where it be sited. Consequently, we cannot say that we know now, definitively, at this time, at this moment, exactly what should be done with the Pershing block. However, what we do know, as you have heard and others have said, that the city is but a few short months away from receiving its next layer of guidance, if you will, on downtown development through the next iteration of the Downtown Master Plan. We believe that a new downtown library will be featured perhaps prominently within that plan, and as such, we advocate delaying a decision on the resolution until such time as this new master plan is received and fully digested. Our reason is that the outcome of the resolution voted on today may close opportunities that the master plan intends to open and leverage for our tomorrow. Now, we're also concerned that the potential for the resolution to be misconstrued as a simple up or down vote on the prospects of a downtown library, and specifically for its siting on the Pershing block, would be perceived through this action. And that would be a mistake. It would be a mistake because, again, our focus is on facilitating a new downtown library wherever it best fits. While we believe that it best fits within the confines of downtown's traditional core, we're willing to wait and see what the master plan recommends. In the meantime, we advocate keeping all options open and on the table, and this includes the Pershing block. Now, the prospect of a new downtown library absolutely excites us. We fully believe in its potential for a number of prospective collective wins, and we anticipate these wins will be more fully articulated within the master plan. But believed to be among the many wins for a new downtown library is its value as a catalyst for broader economic development, multi-block development, as others have testified. Not just therefore on the half block or the full block where the library be sited, but also on the blocks surrounding it. The potential exists for a multi-block development proposal that is rife with opportunities that could prove transformative for our downtown. Considering the library, therefore, as a potential catalyst, we encourage the council to remain mindful of the Library Commission's own research that indicates the return on investment strength of public library proposals.
1 minute.
New 21st century libraries in particular. The study indicated investment returns ranging from a low of just over $2.25 to a high of almost $7 per invested dollar from all dollar sources. And part of this return on investment strength comes from high 7-day-a-week foot traffic that libraries provide, and what the commission termed halo spending, which is the percentage of total library visits that include other spending. 1 out of every 3 visits fall into this category, with spending valued at an average of $25 per person. Now, you heard Mr. Friedman indicate that the foundation is happy to support perhaps forging ahead alone, but opening the door to if we're going to secure the higher rates of return towards the $7 earmarked by the commission, that frankly it would be better and perhaps easier if we partnered with other entities, public or private, and we welcome all comers interested in partnering with us. We simply do not want to close the door for those potential partners by taking a desirable site perhaps off market. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Councilman Camp?
Thank you for your remarks and appreciate the approach you're taking. And I would agree too, the concept of the library first and location is a secondary question, not to totally paraphrase what you said, but I'm wondering, we've heard a couple of people talk about the downtown master plan, and I and Mr. Eskridge are on that board, and I think Ms. Gator Baird is too, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're monitoring that, and I've been active over the last 35 years plus in various downtown master plans. The master plan itself will be projecting out for a good 10 years, if not longer, before a subsequent plan would probably be reviewed. And I guess what I'm wondering after listening to your testimony is holding off till you get the results. I mean, I fully expect there's going to be something in there on the downtown library, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's pointed to Pershing. So if that's really what's there, and I know I see a significant number of individuals here in the audience who are board members or interested in the libraries, and I don't think any of us is not interested in the library. But if that's the case, then wouldn't now be the time to go ahead? The master plan wouldn't guarantee, for example, even if it recommended Pershing to start. I mean, you've got a lot of other hoops to go through, and so if this is what people want, and there's been talk about this, it's kind of a big elephant in the room, so to speak, for many years, would it not be good to then, everyone proceed from this point, and rather than wait, you say a couple months, whatever, but I think it's really even beyond that to say what are the constructive elements that can be done. And I know I met with Mr. Friedman and Mr. Shimmick, who's also in the back of the room, the Herb Squared, as we call them, and had a very fruitful meeting. Gosh, time passes too quickly, Herbs, but I think it was at least a year, maybe 2 years ago, and we've seen presentations that Ms. Leach has presented to the director of the library on what's happened in other cities and so forth. So if that's the process and that's what's wanted, I guess I see the waiting on the downtown master plan as kind of an artificial delay. Let's get the dialogue started now on out in the public rather than kind of behind closed doors and so forth. So I guess those would be else. I don't know if you want to respond to any.
If I may, I'd like to.
Yeah,
two if not 3 points. One is that the resolution, I question to a degree what it actually accomplishes other than putting a second for sale sign on the block for interested parties to know that, no, this time we're really serious about selling the Pershing block. I think Mr. Christensen's point is that perhaps we could look more aggressively at the marketing beyond the World Wide Web and giving it to a commercial realtor. But I feel that what the City Council wants is a plan, that we plan our work and that we work our plan and that we be mindful and adherent to that plan. And to me, that is coming with full definition and articulation in a matter of 3 to 6 months, and that it would behoove us to wait for that full articulation. I say that because as I contemplate the plan just recently reviewed by myself when we were meeting with the consultants at the public meeting over at the Rococo, as I reviewed all of the projects, especially those projects that were designated catalyst projects, every one of them has been accomplished. And therefore, the master plan seems to be masterful, if I may, at truly defining development in the richest sense of the word for what we want this city to become. And therefore, it does behoove us to wait.
Other questions for this testifier? Thank you.
Thank you.
Stewart?
Hello again. I'm Cecil Stewart. I reside at 127 North 11th, apartment number 1. Because of Councilman Eskridge's proposed resolution, I found it hard to know, am I pro or not? And I think I'm pro Councilman Eskridge's resolution and opposing Councilman Kemp's resolution. I beg you to not do anything that will cause this building to be deconstructed. This is an iconic building on the mall. We may not all appreciate its architecture, but it has been here since 1957. It took 16 years of planning and discussion to determine to put that building into place. And architecturally, it is a fortress. We have calculated if it's to be deconstructed, it will be at least 700 tons of material to go into the landfill. And that is more than an annual amount of the entire waste of this city. I ask you to consider just this last week what federal action is going to do to construction prices. I suggest to you professionally that over the next 6 to 10 years, we may not be able to afford the materials required to construct major commercial institutional buildings. It would be a travesty if one of the 3 iconic buildings on the mall were to be taken away. The State Capitol building, this building, the Lincoln Community Foundation, and to a lesser extent, again, you may not appreciate the style, but nevertheless, the Federal Building is iconic. The Historic Society properties, both at the end of the mall and on the side of the mall, are buildings that should continue to embellish and occupy the Centennial Mall. I call to your attention the fact that the civic district of this city is not a square like most cities try to accomplish. It is a cross between J Street and 15th Street, between Lincoln High and this building, between the Capitol and the State Historical Society. And whatever happens on these 2 principal locations of the Capitol District should be sustained and have long life and have important architectural features. In 2015, under the sponsorship of the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority, we produced this study of the food hub possibilities in this community and focused around Pershing as it currently exists. I have provided for each of you a thumb drive that I would ask you to study and consider in honor of your time, as well as the paper destruction characteristics. I very much support the notion that the Department of Urban Development should be given new, early, and immediate responsibilities for deciding on the highest and best civic use. We think, and I'm almost hesitant to use this word again in this chamber on this day, that it is a public market that is properly considered as a major mixed use and economically viable entity to conserve the architecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this testifier? Councilman Christensen.
You provided 6 thumb drives.
Oh.
And in interest of making sure this appeared in the public record, I gave mine to the clerk. So if you have another one.
Right here. I wondered why I ended up with an extra one.
There you go.
And by the way, there's no subliminal suggestion. Some of these are black and others are white, so purely accident. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Dustin Antonello. I'm with the Lincoln Independent Business Association. Our address is 620 North 48th Street, Suite 205. On behalf of the Lincoln Independent Business Association, I'm here to support Councilman Camp's resolution directing Mayor Beitler to issue a request for proposals for Pershing Center. Pershing Center has sat vacant for far too long. The time has come for the mayor to get serious about selling the Pershing Center and get it on the tax rolls. The longer Pershing Center sits vacant, the more potential tax revenue for the city of Lincoln will be lost. In the meantime, the city is actually losing money on the property as it continues to spend taxpayer dollars to prevent Pershing Center from falling into a state of disrepair. According to the mayor's latest budget proposal, the city is spending approximately $100,000 a year to keep the building's pipes from freezing, its alarm system working, and for basic repairs. When Lincoln voters went to the polls in 2010 to approve the issuance of a $25 million bond to fund the construction of Pinnacle Bank Arena, it was understood that the sale of Pershing Center would help offset the cost of building the new arena. It has been over 5 years since the mayor last sought proposals for the sale of Pershing Center, and that process was marred by too many rules and regulations to expedite the sale or redevelopment of Pershing Center. We believe these extensive rules may have had a repressive effect on potential developers and should not be used again. The sale of Pershing Center is a win-win for the city of Lincoln. Not only does it offer a tremendous opportunity to contribute to the economic growth that is happening downtown, it also has the potential to provide much-needed property tax relief for Lincoln homeowners. The one word I want to leave you with today is decade. It's been nearly a decade since a report was issued on what to do with the Pershing Center site. This report, the Pershing Adaptive Reuse and Site Study, was issued way back in October 2008. We cannot afford to waste any more time studying this matter. A decade is more than enough time. It's time to open it up to proposals and get it sold. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this testifier? Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been here for a little bit of time now. Can I get a show of hands? How many people would like to speak on this resolution additionally? Just the two? Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, please continue.
Thank you very much. My name is Ed George, 1138th Street here in Lincoln. I want to speak about the Pershing Auditorium in a way that reconstructs some of the history there. It has a significant history. Many things happened there. Sporting events, concerts, a lot of activities. What happened then is the Pinnacle Bank Arena kind of replaced it. Things shifted to that location. That was subsidized and funded by various sources. I have a very fond memory of that Pershing Auditorium. Where do we need to go to get this?
It's on its way. 3, 2, 1, bam.
There. Probably some of you know that I'm very much interested in agriculture. This is my blood and my background and my history. Nebraska, I'm a proud Lincoln resident. I'm a proud Nebraska. People in Nebraska have been very fortunate to have had a very exciting life. Part of this agricultural experience focused on what you're reading here with the FFA chapters. I had the privilege of writing a grant for the FFA chapters. The grant was awarded to the FFA Foundation for a $200,000 sales grant. As a result of that, I was given an honorary FFA degree, presented at Pershing Auditorium. It has special meaning to me. If we're going to change the use of that building, I'm suggesting some options. You got on the north side of that building, there's a piece of property that's nothing been done. Why not use it as a parking lot for a feed? Put stalls in there so that you can generate some income. The other thing is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this without you. Remember last year? What was it? 150-year celebration. These people represented the people who were the Pony Express writers who rode around the Capitol building with the governor. What is on top of that building? Solar, representing agriculture. Many, many things could happen here as we think about what we could do with this building. What is this down a little ways from the Capitol is the state office building. In that building are located several government agencies, the Nebraska Department of Agriculture, the Department of Natural Resources. So let's think about how we could think about the Pershing Auditorium in a way that could be a public unit and a private unity. I'm thinking about Pershing Auditorium as it exists today. It has a stage. I saw lots of tremendous content performed in front of in that building. I stood there in front of an audience of 6,000 people. FFA chapters come to Lincoln and contribute a tremendous amount of revenue. 6,000 kids for 3 days besides parents and sponsors and teachers. The revenue coming into Lincoln is astronomical. On the Capitol building around the outside perimeter of that is what? 93 counties represented. All right, let's think about how we could do this. I've come up with a suggested idea as a name for it. Pershing could be called the Nebraska Agricultural, Historical, and Heritage Museum. We don't have anything like that in this area. Historically, what's happened in agriculture. So let's just say we take 93 counties. They submit what's relevant in agriculture from their county and present that in a way that could be promoted at this building. We could offer them opportunity to buy a space. We could have conventions there. We could have people that from their history, they could talk about what's happened in agriculture, the historical perspective. I think that there's tremendous opportunities. Yes, I'm a strong supporter of libraries. I have a library science 30 hours of coursework. I worked in the city library right there in that building you're talking about. Tremendous need for education. But also, what about the opportunities for, what else does this represent? The University of Nebraska is a land-grant university. It was meant to be research, teaching, and extension. I was a former county extension educator. So my grandfather talked about agriculture in diverse ways. If we presented in a way to the state that this could be a partnership with everybody in the state of Nebraska, imagine the threshold and the impact we could have by partnerships wherever it may be in Nebraska, beyond those that came to the state tournaments. I found some interesting literature that somewhat surprises me. Here were some FFA kids that came to Lincoln and they were putting together food for food distribution. Can I have just a little more time?
Just briefly, just a
Okay.
couple seconds more.
The Nebraska Tractor Testing Station is a remarkable facility, and it's almost being not giving enough credit for what it does. Urbanization of landscape. There's a story in the paper about how Omaha was faced with farmers losing the land because they were forced to experience encroachment of their land growing into the city. $40,000 that a 90-year-old father and his sons are trying to decide what to do with it. So please consider this idea. Thinking about the Pershing as the Nebraska Agricultural Historical Heritage Museum.
Thank you. Ms. Kinsey? I'm sorry, let me do that. Any questions for this testifier? I did that badly. Thanks. Thank you. Mr. George. Ms. Kinsey, please.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. Well, Watchdogs has an idea to solve both your problems today. Make it into low-income housing. The feds give money for this. Charge Mr. Landis to look into that and to get those for you. You don't need parking because the mayor says we're going to have little trolleys that go around that are unmanned by human beings. So if he doesn't get the grant, why, you can implement the bigger trolley system. The VA campus was a consideration before the council not too many months ago. And you got the land donated by the federal government, and then you found a private developer to build those units. So why couldn't the same situation be implemented in maybe a little bit different way? Libraries as buildings may be extinct in the future. Just ask your public school system what they use for teaching. Every child has a little iPad to take home at the public expense. They don't give them books. Maybe a study should be done of how many people use the library. A lot of it is parents who take library books out, but they can do that at schools too. So that's a consideration of putting a lot of money into a building downtown that could be used for other purposes. As far as what the mayor wants, he's proposed no library and a library, so we don't know where he stands. I suspect it's what the Vision 215 group wants, because he seems to follow their command or their direction. So we urge you to be creative and think of something that is neither on one side or the other, but follow Mr. Camp's proposal to get it out in the public, put it on the public market, find a developer that will do low-income housing, and get Mr. Landis to get them federal funds to do so. And you don't need parking.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this item? This ends our resolutions portion of our agenda, and I'd like to, with the permission of the rest of the council, take a 10-minute break before we come back to the voting session. So everyone, we're going to step outside for about 10 minutes, stretch your legs, come back, and we'll see you at 25 after.
There it is.
City Council, assemble.
Where was that at?
Wait, what are we doing?
Let us call the Monday meeting, July 9th, City Council back to session. We're just finished our resolutions on second reading, is that right? And we are having a voting session for that now.
Yes.
Darn. More billable hours.
Public hearings resolutions.
Sorry.
Take long.
All right, our public hearing resolutions. Item 5A, contract agreement with Mahoney Fire Sprinkler, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Have a motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, would you call the roll?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Comp Plan Conformance 18011, approving an amendment to the Westo redevelopment plan, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Is there any discussion?
There's a motion to amend number 1. Is that correct, Teresa?
Yes, a motion to amend number 1 to accept a substitute resolution.
I move to amend bill number 18R137 by adopting this substitute attachment A attached here too. It really just corrects references to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilwoman
Second.
Raybold, second by Councilman Christensen. Is there any additional discussion? Councilwoman Lamb.
Thank you. So I have some concerns about this. One of the concerns is that we're basically taking all natural growth in the Westo, valuation of Westo properties, and we're taking the city's share away from any other use of it. We're taking the school's share from their use and the county share. And my concern is that, and we heard testimony that although we've had these type of districts before, we haven't used TIF financing. And I think that's an important distinction, because I think that if this was to happen in all these areas of the city, we basically would cut the city off from use of any natural growth in wherever this was instituted. And so I also am, as I expressed, we don't know really what it's going to be spent for sure. And usually when we use TIF dollars, we're presented with a plan. We know what's going to happen and what public benefit it's going to be for. And in this particular instance, we don't have that. So I'm not prepared to support this today. I think that it's not a great precedent to set. And at least at this point in time, I have enough concerns about TIF use in this manner that I can't really support it.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Eskridge, then
Yes.
Councilwoman Raybold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There have been other TIF districts. There have been TIF districts in your district. One of them just recently came off, and that was a TIF district on North 27th Street. And when that district was established, no one knew where it would lead. That's kind of the nature of these things. Property comes available. If you've got the money there, you can purchase, somebody can purchase the property, develop it, and that's exactly what we've seen on North 27th Street. Revitalizing the area, making it more vibrant, bringing in residential spaces. Westo's different. Westo is a place where it's a business environment primarily. It's a place where the business association on Westo is really, really engaged, as we heard from Randy Haas. They've been working diligently for decades, trying to vitalize the area. This is another tool to help them revitalize the place where they are investing their dollars, their time, and also serves an important city interest in terms of being a gateway to our downtown. So I'm very much in support of this plan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just need to clarify, the 27th was a business improvement district, and those are assessed against the businesses. It's not, wasn't.
It's a TIF district.
Councilwoman Raybold.
Well, I firmly believe that tax increment financing, business improvement districts, all these are tools in our economic development tool shed that municipalities use to their fullest extent. I sort of took offense when they were saying that we in the city of Lincoln have been abusing tax increment financing. I mean, if you look around our city, we have such amazing projects that have been successful, that have created that catalyst, that energy for continued development and growth that make Lincoln and Lancaster County one of the top growing counties in our state of Nebraska because we've utilized these tools, and I think we've utilized them effectively. So I am very supportive of this. We've watched development happen along West O Street. And this is sort of the additional jumpstart that it needs to bring the number of businesses that are starting to really consider West O a great location to locate. So we're hoping that this will continue to jumpstart those initiatives and that they will grow and expand and make it a gateway that'll be very pleasing for folks coming from out west into our city. So I do support this program, and it's amazing to see what we can accomplish if we put our minds to it and if we put a little bit of investment from the city to it. And these businesses will take this additional sprucing up or sidewalks or whatever they choose to reinvest in and take it and leverage it and make the gateway to our city even nicer.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Any additional discussion? So we have a motion to amend. Motion by Councilwoman Raybold, seconded by Councilman Christensen. Call the roll, please.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1.
Our next item, please.
This would be a
I'm sorry,
vote on
that
the
was
main
To
motion.
amend, yes. Thank you, guys. Now, discussion on the original amendment, original resolution.
The amended.
The amended resolution, yeah. Thank you. Would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 6-1.
Stay focused. I really want this meeting over. It's been long.
Next is item 5C, interlocal agreement with Omaha Council Bluffs Metropolitan Area Planning Agency, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
We have a motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilman Christensen. Discussion?
I'd just like to make a comment. I appreciate we've done these aerial photography, and it is the coming thing and very helpful. I just question, we're spending $1 million and we just $169,000 a year for this period, and it just seems like there ought to be something there that we should be able to latch on to. And so I just don't know if the full investigation had been done or if we just went with this. But I'll be supportive, but I really question just this continued expenditure of soft dollars like this.
Other comments? Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 5D is the agreement with Windstream, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next is item 5E, approving an agreement between the city, West Haymarket JPA, and TDP Phase 1 LLC, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Any discussion? Councilman
I'm going to move
Christensen?
this item be delayed till the 6th of August to give some time for the parties involved to give us some clarity.
Second?
Motion. I'm going here. Motion by Councilman
with
Christensen.
public hearing?
Second by
That's
Councilwoman.
with continued public hearing.
Councilwoman Lamb with continued public hearing. Any discussion about the delay? Motion to delay. Would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then is item 5F, the 5-year strategic plan for HUD, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Is there a discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 5G, the fiscal year 2018 annual action plan for HUD, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
A motion by Councilman Eskridge, second by Councilwoman Raybold. Is there discussion? I'd like to say I look forward to the continuing discussion addressing housing needs in Lincoln. And then I'd like to ask you to call the roll.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 5H, as in Henry, resolution directing the mayor to solicit proposals to purchase Pershing Auditorium, introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Eskridge. Councilman Camp.
And I'd like to make a motion to hold this over for 1 week with the idea that Mr. Eskridge and I visit on the language and come up with something for this council to vote on.
Second?
Have a motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilwoman Raybold to delay 1 week.
Is that just action only, or do you want public
Yes.
hearing?
Yeah, it's
Action only.
Action only. Discussion of the motion to delay? Call the roll, please.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are our public hearing ordinances second reading. I'll call items 6A and B together. They are change of zone 18012, application of Lancaster County Ag Society for a change from AG agricultural to P public use district on approximately 157 acres of property generally located at 4100 North 84th Street, and approving an amended memorandum of understanding between the city and Lancaster County Ag Society for the change, and to amend the special permit relating to the reduced H4 General Commercial District zoned property.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the council, now I'm Tommy Houston. Here for you today speaking on behalf of my client, the Lancaster County Agricultural Society. The two items on your agenda have really are the result of a work over the last 6 to 8 months between the Ag Society and the City of Lincoln to move the Lancaster Event Center forward. I thought it'd be helpful for me to start with something that I learned in my course of my representation of the Agricultural Society. Most people are not aware of the fact that the Lancaster County Agricultural Society is a separate political subdivision independent from Lancaster County. It is organized under Nebraska state law, but also permitted to be formed as a Nebraska nonprofit corporation. And the Lancaster County Agricultural Society is such an animal that is a political subdivision, but yet is formed as a Nebraska nonprofit corporation, independent of the county and really governed by its independent Board of Commissioners and Board of Directors. In that capacity, the Lancaster County Agricultural Society operates the event center out at 84th in Havelock and has been for the last approximately 20 years. The two items that are in front of you today really pertain to moving the Agricultural Society and the Event Center forward. The first item is the change of zone, seeking to change approximately 157 acres from the AG zone to the P public zone. The Ag Society qualifies for that zoning classification due to its status as a political subdivision. The Planning Commission considered this question on its consent agenda on May 23rd, and was recommended approval unanimously. The second item on your agenda really deals with a memorandum of understanding. The original memorandum was signed back in 2008, so in 10 years we wanted to update it and bring it current, but it's really laying the groundwork for the work necessary, the event center for the National High School Rodeo event scheduled for 2020 and 2021. The primary improvements that are going to be made currently for the rodeo include expansion of the campground to the east side of the campus, including water service and electrical service in addition to the grading, allowing more than 1,000 camping stalls within that campground. There will be a new grandstand constructed adjacent to the outdoor arena, and in addition there will be additional improvements with the trail location and a new perimeter road. Just a couple highlights of the MOU. It does deal with the improvements that are being made within the floodplain took some work, and we worked together closely with the planning department, the building and safety department to bring those issues together. It includes an emergency evacuation plan for that campground. Paragraph 4 deals with the intersection improvements approved by this council last year that are scheduled for 2019 at 84th and Havelock. Paragraph 10 mentions that there may be a phase 3 of this project or of the event center coming forward, but in that event, the MOU would be supplemented. And then just briefly on the schedule, it is anticipated that the grading will occur this year along with the expansion for the campground. The loop road will be installed. As I mentioned, the intersection improvements to be done by the City of Lincoln are to be constructed in 2019. At that time, the event center is also anticipating the construction of the grandstand. And then the high school rodeos will be here in July of 2020, bringing countless fans and patrons to the City of Lincoln. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilman Camp.
Yes, just a quick one, Mr. Houston. I understand the project and everything. You mentioned there'd be additional 1,000 spaces for RVs or what have you.
Yeah, it's this area on the eastern portion of the property.
And my question is this, I recognize the participants and everything will be bringing trailers for the horses and that sort of thing. But along the way on the whole Ag Center, there'd been talk over the years how it's going to create more motel rooms. And here you're putting 1,000 there. And I guess, can you comment on that to where that economic factor is, whereas we wouldn't?
There has been a new hotel constructed at 84th and Holdridge, and I think they're very happy with their occupancy because of the events at the event center. You will notice that the change of zone, we don't seek to change the zone of that corner on the northwest corner of the campus because that's highly valuable property. And we would like to, we're contemplating bringing a hotel user to that location. That would, again, have to come back to this council because the H4 zone we would envision would require a special permit for that use.
And that would be a private business that would be on the tax rolls?
Correct. The MOU specifically states that that corner is going to be subject to the zoning ordinance and impact fees, et cetera.
Thank you.
Councilman Eskridge.
Mr. Houston, previously when we've heard how I've been on the subject of StarTran, we've heard from individuals needing access to this area, and their access is via Walmart. Is there any pedestrian connection between Walmart and the facilities there at all?
The MOU does require, as a part of I'm trying to remember the time schedule, it does deal with sidewalks and obligates the event center to build this first segment from gate 1 down to the Walmart, down to the property line, because this is the Murdoch Trail that goes over 84th Street. The event center is obligated to build this segment.
Okay, excellent. It's a start.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Does anyone else like to testify on this item?
All right. Very exciting there.
So that, here we have, I can't remember the
Concludes our
motion.
public hearing then?
Yep, can't remember the motion. Who?
Do you need to say a few other things,
You need to say
Teresa, or are we
something.
done?
Our only resolution on first reading is item 8A, and items 9A through C are our only ordinances on first reading.
Mr. Chair, I move for adjournment.
Second. A motion by Councilman Camp, second by Councilman Christensen. Would you call the roll?
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Thank you. We are adjourned.